it's a labor-intensive process, but that's how we can manage around the law by requiring prior authorization. But it's very important for us to establish the clinical benefits of the drug first. And so those drugs that are preferred, those drugs can be prescribed without restriction. Those claims go through the pharmacy without any issue. It is a non-preferred drug. Those drugs are the claims to stop, and those require prior authorization. And most physicians call our call center at UAMS, and pharmacists and physicians have that conversation. If they approve it, our pharmacists have access to the claims adjudication system. The claim goes through. If they can't approve it, that physician can appeal to our medical director, and we have two physicians there that can handle that. So we do have flexibility on how that's constructed, and I'll say it's a very solid approach given the constraints that we have to operate on within with the law. On the commercial side, what you've seen over on the employee benefit side, it's a self-funded plan. We have way more flexibility because it runs money. That's really the difference between the management of the Medicaid program and what you'll see outside of Medicaid.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get a hold on here is, do you see the same opportunity for savings in the Medicaid program as we saw in the EBD managed program if you had the same flexibility?
I see some. I don't see the thing where you saw the significant drop, like 20% drop on EBD. That's because a lot of things that we put in place in a year in a very short amount of time. Those things, there was a lot of low-hanging fruit, and we took advantage of that very quickly. I can tell you that this program, and before this program was implemented in 2005, those years leading up to that, the Arkansas Medicaid drug program was experiencing increases, cost increases of around 15 to 20% per year. And since that time, that cost curve has been flattened. But you mentioned that this past year we saw an uptick. And I'll tell you a little bit after or at the end why we think that happened. And it's the same dynamic that we're seeing in the private sector as well. But this program, and we're managing a piece of the pie. The drugs that we do not manage is managed internally by the Arkansas Medicaid pharmacy staff. That's separate from the drug list. That's managed very tightly as well. So I would say that there isn't a huge. There's some opportunity, and I have specific recommendations that we can do. There's opportunity for us to save a significant amount of money, but not on the same scale that we did with the state before, just because there's not as much low-hanging fruit.
Now, and for the expansion population, I guess we don't really know how the carriers are, what practices they're using for administering prescriptions and just paying for them.
I believe so. They probably have some step therapy, some more tools that you'll typically see in the commercial pharmacy program. One of the primary differences here between Medicaid and what you see with state employees or a commercial plan, the tool that you have at your disposal in a commercial environment is that the patient is actually paying a higher copay or more of the cost, and so you can use that cost sharing as a tool to steer behavior. With the Medicaid population, the copays are going to be in the 50 cent to $1 to $3 range, and so you really don't have that much leverage of a $50 copay to steer someone. So that's why you'll see a much tighter prior authorization management on the Medicaid side and more cost sharing options on the commercial side.
So which do you think is doing a more efficient job of managing the prescription program, the Medicaid program, or the expansion program through the carriers?
I like I think effectiveness. I think the Medicaid program does a better job on cost containment and effectiveness. As far as efficiency or administrative overhead. You may have less overhead on the private side, but I think there's probably less management too. It's a trade-off.
So do you think that carriers that are administering the prescription program on the expansion program are doing exactly the same as they do for private commercial pay insurance policies?
I don't know.
I guess we can ask them that tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't want to be unfair, but I don't know all the details of what they're doing.
Okay, I'm sorry, Representative Hammer, you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, in the 40 drugs choice, I got a call from somebody in the industry yesterday. They were complaining because they know there's a drug out there that FDA has not approved yet. So I'm wondering, are you seeing anything that's contributing to the overall cost as far as the federal government dragging their feet on approving some drugs that maybe could come in and be a better option or less cost, a lesser cost option to the 40 drugs of choice? Or can you tell us anything about that and how it might affect that $300 million price?
I can tell you that, and I've got a slide towards the end that will touch on that slide, but I can tell you that the drug pipeline, and there are certainly drugs that add improvement in value to patient care. We manage very tightly outside of it, and when we're talking about saving boards and commercial plans, we keep a very close eye on the drug pipeline, on drugs that are getting ready to be approved and those that are newly approved. And the vast majority of the drugs that are hitting the market, they're in what we call a class called specialty drugs or biotech drugs, several thousands of dollars per dose or per month supply. The overall value proposition, and I'm painting this with a wide brush, the overall value proposition of what we're seeing come out of the pipeline is very low for the cost. And so we evaluate these drugs and see because what you see on television or what you see in advertisements and what you see in the peer-reviewed published literature is completely different. And so for the vast majority of drugs that will be hitting the market, we simply on the commercial side will exclude those. Now Medicaid, they would probably can't exclude because if they pay a rebate, they have to cover, but they can do a manual review. They're very effective doing that and ensuring patients who need them get them. But to answer your question about how that's going to affect the $300 million, it certainly will, but we're trying to manage it as tightly as we can to ensure that the patients who need those drugs can get them, but you just can't open up a floodgate.
Go ahead.
Okay. Any other questions on the Medicaid or the preferred drug list? As far as management we're doing, we'll take about 85,000 calls per year in our center. So it's a busy place. I want to skip to that next slide, the services that we provide for the
Before you do the call center, I think that was one of the things in Mr. Stevens' report that we have 2 or 3 call centers. Is that accurate?
Yes. You have a call center at UAMS that handles just the preferred drug list, and then I think the rest of the calls will go to Magellan, the organization that Dr. Reed represents. And those would be more member calls or more benefit design. It's a different set of calls. They're not redundant topics. Now the question of can you consolidate those call centers for efficiency? That's a great question. Having those located in one place and overlap.
But they're tasked to answer different questions now?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And one of the requirements that, one of most PBMs, like a call center that handles prior authorizations, typically those calls will go to a technician or a non-pharmacist first, and there'll be a percentage of those that will escalate to a pharmacist. Our program is set up through agreements with the legislature, the medical society, and a lot of organizations that mandated that our calls be answered by pharmacists directly. So it can't be a non-pharmacist and then we used to raise the process. It's a different model. on the state employee side, they don't have in-house pharmacy expertise, and so we've had an opportunity over time to expand the level of service to that plan, and so we really provide a very comprehensive management of the pharmacy benefit. We operate the committee structures, the subcommittees that report to the board, and Dr. Jill Johnson on our faculty, we work very closely with her. She drives the agenda and what goes into the drug utilization and evaluation committee. That's the I guess EBD's good housekeeping seal of approval that they evaluate these new drugs and come up with ideas about how to appropriately manage these drugs for that population, and then all those recommendations go to the board for final approval. We also have an on-site pharmacist that actually oversees day-to-day operations and has been very valuable to steer the plan and to be there as a resource for any type of calls coming into that organization. We also mainly handle prior authorizations and appeals for the state employees, just the same way we would for Medicaid. A few months ago, and I know there's been a discussion at the task force about customer service and satisfaction and those types of things. Since pharmacy is such a different animal, a few months ago we moved about 4 customer service representatives and hired a couple and placed them adjacent to our pharmacist call center over at UAMS, and we thought that cross-pollination training would help and provide a higher level of service. And so it's still fairly new to us, but we think that that's an improvement as far as service to the membership. And where our pharmacists handle physicians' calls, these individuals will handle member calls or questions about their benefit. We also oversee the programming of all of those rules into the PDM's adjudication system, so we're not relying on PDM to program those rules the way they want to program them. We oversee that. And this topic here, and I'll address it. I want to address this later on as far as my final slide on recommendations on this manufacturer rebate. We're on the same page about I wish rebates would go away if drugs were appropriately priced in the first place and we didn't need them. And it's a labor-intensive process. I think we need to address it, and I'll tell you why. But that's, we're going to oversee, or we're going to assume that responsibility of contracting for rebates on behalf of UD. Now, I'll just go ahead and say, so I won't forget this, I think that this plan, as well as any state or tax-funded plan, has a huge opportunity to consolidate some things in terms of formulary and to do a much better job on purchasing. We're leaving some dollars on the table, and you can do that through rebate contracting. But I'll talk about that in detail in a minute. As far as financial results, and these are numbers that we produced in-house that we saw about close to a $30 million drop in cost to EBD. That's to this task force. That's really no news. There will not be a $30 million drop this year, and we're already starting to see trends to start rebounding, and we still have a lot of work to do. One thing in this next slide I just want to share is that this was an independent piece of information that EBD's independent actuary at the May board meeting shared what they were seeing as far as the national trend, and this is another national benchmark, and it's actually published by Express Scripts. Good publication, a lot of good information, covers a lot of lives, but we covered or evaluated their national trend versus what EBD's trend was, and you see about a 24% spread as far as outperforming the national average. And that's just a number. The thing that we're most satisfied with about that is that the actuary said that performance, along with some of the other things that have occurred in the plan, like a reduction in high-cost claimants, those kinds of things, all that added up to where they could reach recommendations our school teachers and state employees, and that contributed to that, and we were very pleased. I'll say too, that we still have a long way to go, still have a lot of work to do to improve that. I'd love to see some reductions at some point, but,
What are the impediments to that? I know we're not talking about EBD here, but I wouldn't assume that they're the same for both programs. So what are the impediments to doing the additional things that you'd like to see done?
one thing, that next slide, we can put together, I think, a solid, a clinically sound benefit, one that makes financial sense. One of the things that is occurring simultaneously to this, that a lot of people are unaware of, and this is the thing that we talked about before, but it's literally choking our health system, are these price increases that we're seeing. The manufacturers are increasing these prices at will. And you can see, this is from the independent stores, but you can see the types of increases. And this is over a several year period. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is very common practice. But you can see the types of drugs that are involved in it. Two of those products are insulins. That's the number one drug class in terms of total cost for the state employees plan. The insulin claims are at the top for the Medicaid program. We have a lot of diabetics in the state, and so to get people on insulin, we want them on insulin, to be treated. And so in the case of the Medicaid environment, a copay for a month's supply of insulin may be $1 or $2. And then, I know in state employees, the average insulin claim is somewhere in the ballpark of $500 a month. And so the state's taking a hit on that. Then if you throw in a 350% increase over 6 or 7 years.
So so you're telling the number one drug that we use on our EBD program and the Medicaid program is these insulin drugs?
Well, they're at the top with Medicaid, but as far as the top class and total spend, it's the diabetic drugs, and then within that, the insulin class.
And they have increased 350% since 2007.
Yes, this particular product, but when you look down at Atlantis, it's 160%, but the insulin cost increases are driving, and that's across the board. Insulin products that have experienced that type of inflation.
What is the market rationale for that? What does the manufacturer say is their rationale for to justify that type of cost increase?
Well, we've not heard them explain that. Our conclusion is greed. We can't, I mean, the pricing rationale of a new drug that is marketed, and I understand the cost that a manufacturer incurs to get a drug to product, and how many of those compounds that never make it to market, and that's a real issue.
These aren't new products though, right? These are products that they should have already recovered their development costs.
You think so, yes.
Representative Hammer, you recognize for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are these that are listed on the back sheet on the slide, are these part of the 40 drugs of choice? Is that the right term? Or is that
These aren't involved, no, in those 40, we really, as far as the preferred drug list that we're talking about for Medicaid, it has several hundred drugs on it, but it's about 30 classes of drugs.
Okay. To my question a while ago about DFA opening up the opportunity for new drugs to come online, but they can be very slow. And I understand that the liability if you let something out and it's not tested and everything. But are there some other options that you're aware of that are sitting out there that DFA is holding up because of whatever reason that could compete to give us other options other than these that are on this list, or this is what we got to live with it, and they got us where they want us?
Well, there's nothing in the management process or as far as approving drugs or drugs coming to market or that we can cover that would solve this problem. We've got some other solutions for this. For example, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'll tell you what, my next slide will address that question.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, you let me know.
Yeah, before we leave this slide though, and again, the idea of, who's greedy, in my experience, it's amazing what happens, how people feel about their money and your money, right? And so one of the challenges we've got in an industry like healthcare, where we've got more government involvement and more socialist approaches than we do in a private market, is we get downwind of the overall system, and then we play whack-a-mole. So if you look at the way the patent system works when it comes to drug creation, if you look at the expectations for solving new diseases, if you look at the regulations and what happens if anybody does a clinical and anybody gets sick in the clinical and the lawsuits that fly, all of this stuff, right? That if we could get, and I would love to do it, including with the greedy companies, right? Because I agree they're greedy. I just happen to people that are not greedy. But anyway, if we could get all those people together and say, let's start at the beginning, and how much time should somebody get to sell their product before we take their property and give it to someone else to sell for free, right? And we call those generics. And we get those at a dramatically lower price because somebody else did all the work, all the testing and everything else to make it happen. Now, the system is the way it is, and we can't change what happens in Washington, and we have to live with that. But before we go pointing fingers at one group, I just want us to be a little bit sensitive to the fact that there's no such thing as a free lunch. And if we're going to get, umpteen% of our drugs for 2 cents, because they're generics, the companies that are inventing all this stuff and saving everybody's lives are going to have to do something to stay in business. And so I don't like it either. But the challenge is, how do we solve some of these things more holistically? So I know that doesn't lead us anywhere, and I'm not asking you to answer it, but this is one of the outcomes of controlling everything at the government level, in my view.
Representative Boyd, right
I've got a question here. So, of all the countries around the world in this global economy, does anyone besides the United States not have price controls on prescription drugs that you're aware of?
I don't know who does. I know some many do, but I know we're paying what the market will bear in many cases.
So, can you think of any other entity in the healthcare equation that can go up on its prices and get paid for them at any time besides drug companies?
Yeah.
Representative Hammer, you recognize.
Thank you. On your chart, I was looking at the source that it's quoted from, and I'm going to look them up to see, about their reputation of putting out numbers. But I'm curious, on the right-hand column, those aren't Arkansas numbers, right?
No, this was taken from that source, and that's the way they reported it.
Okay, well, can we get it broken down, or maybe request chair? It'd be interesting to see how that breaks down to the Arkansas budget, personalize it down to where we live,
Absolutely, yeah, we can get that.
and see how that falls into that, please.
Yes,
All right, thank you.
We can do that.
Okay, thanks, Doc. Go ahead.
And as far as just finally on the recommendations, and I think, Representative Gray had brought this up earlier about a different approach. These are recommendations, and I wanted to just point out that these recommendations are based on the world that we live in, and our experiences and what we do on a day-to-day basis in terms of trying to manage the prescription drug programs and keep things affordable for our membership and for taxpayers. And these recommendations also are not specific to which drugs we cover, which we exclude, certain benefit design or specific benefit design recommendations. These recommendations are more that they apply to the platform or the management framework in which all that sits on. And not, what we think or what I think is that piece of it is just as important as the benefit design itself, because if the framework or the platform in which the pharmacy benefit sits on or resides on is not structured properly, that's an area where millions of dollars can be hidden, wasted, or misappropriated without anyone's knowledge. And so one thing is that and the other thing too is with EDA or with the state employees, we've also participated or assisted in writing an RFP for the pharmacy benefit model rather than a full PDM turnkey model, we're looking at our claims processing. PDMs process claims better than anyone out there. They've got the engine to do that. The real-time electronic processing from pharmacies to the PDM, bouncing off of benefit designs, coming back within a few seconds, and it's done. Plus the data that's collected is very rich. So, but we really, and this is all about determining the pieces of the pharmacy pie and figuring out who does the best job with that part of the pie and buying that, and then everyone else play their strength. And so claims processing we would buy separately, and that's what we're looking to do for the state employees. And then also, we have a lot of in-state expertise, physicians, pharmacists, and I think that's been demonstrated in the results that we've been able to produce even on the Medicaid side and non-Medicaid. And so we propose that we allow local management decision-making within this state to help manage a consolidated pharmacy benefit. Also, with that philosophy, to expand on that, there are additional ideas and expansion of what we have going that we're doing with Medicaid and our non-Medicaid, our state employees, government-funded plans. So there are more things that we can do. One thing that Dr. Durden mentioned was the literature, and we talked about the Oregon data that Medicaid sends, and we evaluate that. That process is very labor intensive. Those reviews are done on a schedule that's driven by the consortium. We think that there are, and folks at Medicaid agree, that there are some opportunities for us to do some of our own evaluations of literature to kind of help supplement what they're currently getting. So UMS has the capability and the expertise to do those reviews that can help expedite the reviews of some of these classes and include those in the preferred vendors, and that expands our ability to manage the plan. The other thing is to establish a statewide Arkansas drug formulary where it makes sense, and to send where we can the same message that would for patients and physicians and pharmacists, so we know that there's a consistency of messages, because with all the drug plans that are out there, it's so confusing, no one can keep up with it. Let's refer on this formulary, let's refer on that, but at least for the tax-funded plans to have some type of consolidation for consistent management. The other thing that allows you to do is through the contracting process is that you're not fragmented in one plan doing one thing, one plan doing another. Also allow in-state management and manufacturer rebate contracting. That piece, although we'd all rather rebates go away, but one of the things that we can do is that we have opportunities. Insulin is another example where we have multiple manufacturers, 2 or 3 manufacturers of the same type of insulin, and you see the rate of increase that's hitting the plan. Through rebate contracting, you can pair or you can exclude one company, or you can make one exclusive if you're going to cover that piece. The rebate contracting, in order to keep our drug costs under control and do it appropriately, some very difficult decisions are going to have to be made, and that would be an avenue where we could really purchase better as a state, and also incorporate some price protection for a period of time with these contracts. The Medicaid program also does rebate contracting, and they do a very good job because they incorporated price control in those contracts. And so if the manufacturer, they want to go up 30% a year or whatever it is, then based on the price they guarantee Medicaid, they're going to rebate back to what their guaranteed price is. And so I think the state can take advantage of that through that type of contracting. The other thing is to require a better use of data and technology to engage patients and providers. I don't have all the answers to that, but one thing is that we can build the best program in the country, and if we don't communicate better to our providers, and take that advantage, or take that opportunity to use our data much better than we are today, we're going to lose, because a lot of times patients find out about high co-pays at pharmacy counter, and physicians aren't aware. And I think that pharmacy data is the cleanest data in healthcare out there, because you can see exactly what drug, what strength, how much, what quantity was dispensed. Lots of things that can be done with pharmacy data that, and everybody struggles with that, everybody. And so I think we can make some improvements there. And then also, it may not apply to this model, but we are being impacted on state employees or non-Medicaid plans, is that the use of manufacturer coupons. I know in most government plans, these are prohibited, but that's just a caution more than a recommendation. Because what happens is that those coupons, and while we all agree that patients would benefit by being able to obtain medications at lower copay or lower out-of-pocket, what that does is that these coupons are associated with very expensive drugs. It insulates the patient from reality, and then the cost incurred by the manufacturer, that's just added to the cost of the drug on the back end. So we find that
Many other states done away with coupons. Or do you know that?
Like Dwight said, they're prohibited in all government paid programs. Medicare prohibits them, every state Medicaid program prohibits them, but they're proliferating commercial plans, and looks great to the patient, get a $1,000 drug for no copay, but somebody's paying the bill at the end of the month, and they end up paying, full brunt of the expense.
Does that ban apply to private option, private insurance policies?
That I don't know, and that's why I'm just bringing that up, because we just need to be mindful of that, but I'm not sure if that impacts private option patients today or not. And we can't see it on our side, because what happens is the pharmacist transmits the claim to the health plan, and it adjudicates and comes back, says the patient owes $60, then they send that coupon claim electronically somewhere else that takes care of that $50 or $60, and the patient walks away. And the other thing is that the health plan captures that $50 or $60 towards the deductible or your maximum out of pocket. So the plan, it's just the reporting, it messes all that up, but we feel like
Plans also encourage physicians to prescribe more expensive drugs into the Medicaid population as well, because they've been doing it in the private. Because Medicaid, there's really no copay, right?
That's right.
And they've been doing it in the private because they get the coupons to take care of the medical. I guess what I'm asking, has any state, this is one of your recommendations, has any state done this? Said, we're not going to let coupons in here.
I know at one time Massachusetts did, I think they adjusted their ban on it. We'll research that. I don't have that information at this point. It's just,
It's like rebates, it just distorts the market, makes it hard to afford.
it does. But that's it.
Okay, Representative Ham, you're recognized for a question.
One of Rory, if you don't mind. I didn't hear your opinion a while ago on the, and I'm wondering, both of y'all chime in about the cost to the program as far as somebody manages Magellan or oversees Magellan in the issuance of the pharmaceutical side. Can you have any comments about that as far as their management, whether that's really necessary, or is that something the department could do if we could look at that as an area of improvement?
That recommendation actually was in my last 2 monthly summary reports, because it was surprising to me to see that a vendor who's performing essentially the same service Magellan provides for you, they provide in 23 other states without such oversight. It caused me to pause. Why is it, what's so different about what's going on here in Arkansas that same vendor needs oversight to do their everyday work? And it caused me to pause. So it looks way out of whack with my experience with that same vendor in other states.
May I ask a follow-up, Mr. Chair? What, so is there any reason, in your opinion, that we ought to continue that contract? I can't remember, how much is that contract, do you remember?
I know they provide a variety of services. This notion of program management office, PMO, arose out of the IT businesses. And the predecessor of McKesson, Hewlett Packard, is essentially an IT company. So it wouldn't have been shocking to me to see functions like PMO around IT companies. Magellan, although they have an IT platform, it's taxi tested tough, runs fine in 24 states. I just didn't see any explainable purpose for having to provide oversight for that through a PMO. I would defer to the folks who get value and brought them on board to defend why they need that help. But to me, you could either have that process provided by a state employee, or it may not be required at all.
All right, thanks, Mr.
And again, this would be, I would expect, one of the recommendations that's included in the final report that after you all have a chance to investigate the pros and cons, and we'll consider it. Senator.
Before we leave that one though, because it's like, I remember sitting in a hearing, I think it was last month, and we had the DHS leader down there, and we said the contract all went to heck in a handbasket because we didn't have somebody overseeing the whole thing, and the mistake was that we didn't have somebody that was coordinating all of those things, and that we didn't have the capacity. Now it feels like they're doing that, and I don't know whether it's right or wrong. I don't know whether that was right or wrong. I don't know whether this was right or wrong. I'm just worried a little bit. I'm trying to micromanage something like this without knowing the full picture on these guys. And I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just fearful that from these seats, it's kind of tough for us to micromanage those.
That's right. Again, there would be a lot of research that have to be done on them before recommendations ready. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, just briefly.
We're not terminating any contracts today.
Well, that's fine. We've not had a chance to visit. I'm John Sandy, Director of DHS. We've not had a chance to visit, and I actually sent an email with a question came up earlier asking, what the situation was. So let me tell you, I'll try not to read it, but the understanding I have from what I got back from MMIS people is, yes, the pharmacy component is in place. It still has to be tied in with the rest of the MMIS system, and you need a project manager to make sure those systems work together. And that, get this right, we also have to get the system certified with CMS, and project manager helps to make sure it gets certified. So in short order, yes, it's kind of in isolation, it's working now, but there's still quite a bit of project management to make sure it fits with the other components that come on board. And then in 2017, so that we would then get rid of them once we make sure that those components work together well. So we don't have any interest in keeping them on board any longer than we need to, but it does sound like, at least our folks are saying, we still need some of that oversight.
Okay, like I said, what I would hope is you guys will work with Stephen Group, and then you can sort out whether it's a recommendation that you want to bring forward or not.
I'll forward the email to you and go from there.
All right, Senator Irvin, you have a question on that?
No, I would just second that because I think they're looking at the whole thing, but from a revelation from Tom Masante and what they presented. But my question was, you had mentioned the Oregon Consortium, and you had mentioned, and I know we've reviewed that contract, and it's one of the ones I questioned about our capability of being able to do that in the state versus issuing a contract to be a part of that and to do that. So you had mentioned it in your report. If you could expand on that, and would that replace that contract, or because I'm not interested in duplicating services, but I am interested in saving money and being able to do some things in-house if we can. Could you expand on that?
Sure. That contract was in place before we came into existence, so that's kind of what it was. And I say that they do really good work, and the thing that all the stakeholders like about the Oregon report is it's very thorough, very comprehensive, and it provides good clinical foundation for decisions that are made. Excuse me. Over time, we developed, we don't have the staff to to do, 300-page report, but we have staff that are very capable of providing reviews of the peer-reviewed literature, and we're doing all of that for our U-of-A systems and state employees, and that's been developed over time, and so that would be a decision that I think that Medicaid would make. I would certainly say that we would think it's reasonable to look at that and see if we can meet the needs of Medicaid collectively, and then other organizations would take advantage of that that's tax funded.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Gray, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just kind of have two questions, and they may be more directed towards Director Seeley, but he had mentioned that, we had Cognizante to essentially tie in with the MMIS system, and he said that there were as other components come on board. So I'd like to know what those other components might be that we need the system for. And then the second part to that question is, how long have we been contracting with them, and how long, have we been contracting with them for 4 years and we're still not finished, or is this a 6-month contract that we're into? If Director Seeley wouldn't mind to come back up, you should just keep your chair. Thank you.
Sure, I don't know how long the contract's been in place, I don't have it in front of me. There were 4 components, I believe, the MMIS system. There's kind of the core operating system. There's the pharmacy component. There's the component where we really do the data analysis, and what's the 4th component? Kind of 4 major components. So it's tying into the pharmacy component, I think was the first one to come online. So it's now going to be tying into those other 3 components. Because the MMIS systems you brought up, it's what pays providers, it's providers on, it's a huge system.
Okay, and follow up real quick, Mr. Chair. Maybe one thing that we could look at doing then is the pharmacy component's already been completed, but we still need Cognizante to finish up the 4th aspect, that any future contracts could essentially take out the oversight of HP and of Magellan if we don't need them anymore. Does that make sense?
Sure, I'll go back. We'll be happy to look at it. There are things we're doing we don't need to be doing. I'm happy to take them out. We're always going to save money in contracts.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, that's all the folks we have on the list. Dwight, Roy, thank you all very much. It's been very interesting and educational. I would ask again, you guys continue to work together. You've got some good recommendations there, but I think you can work with the Stephen Group and see whether that'll be folded into their recommendations, final recommendations in December or October or not. Without anything else, you guys are excused, and we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is, Roy, did you have a presentation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I had about 4 or 5 slides. Actually, 2 of them have been covered reasonable in our discussion, so this would, if you
That'd be fine.
just take a couple minutes, be happy to run through
Okay.
kind of early findings.
You bet. Press on.
Thank you. So thank you. I'm Rory Rickard. I'm the pharmacy representative with the Stephen Group. I've worked in the business of pharmacy for just over 30 years. Never really filled prescriptions. Always worked in the businesses of pharmaceutical manufacturer, wholesalers, retailers, PSAOs, PBMs, discount card, technology companies. I've worked up and down the pharmacy supply chain. So what I come to you today with is my view of the Medicaid program over the last 6 weeks, early observations of things that stuck out to me. And the first one I'd like to cover is, in your state, you have a number of prescriptions for beneficiary per month limits. They vary by where you're getting your care. They also vary by your age. But in adults, I think we should view expenses on prescription drugs as a very efficient and inexpensive medical intervention. If somebody has diabetes, you want them to take their insulin every day. You don't want any programmatic barriers to them to be able to get insulin. And I saw the number of prescriptions per person per month as a potential barrier to people who really need maintenance medications getting access to them. So I'm not just coming here to say, hey, why don't you think about throwing out this good cost-saving initiative of limiting number of prescriptions per person per month, but actually rethink it and create a list of drugs. The university could certainly help with this, a list of drugs that are exempt from the per month prescription limit. And it would be a list very similar to commercial PBMs who designate drugs either acute use or maintenance use. And maintenance use drugs, commercial PBMs like to fill those in the mail-order facility. That doesn't exist here in the Medicaid program, but we could use a very similar list to allow exemptions from the monthly per prescription limits. Another thing I'd like you to think about in this context is, I'm here giving you comments about your pharmacy program, but you don't just have a pharmacy program, you have a medical and a pharmacy program serving your Medicaid beneficiaries, and caution you not to squeeze the program on one side just for the balloon to pop open on the other side. So, you could try to manage your drug spend down to zero, but every beneficiary would be in the doctor's office, the hospital, and the emergency room. You wouldn't do that. So if you thought about implementing something in lessening these per prescription limits, I'd want you to think about it in terms of the benefits or the problems it might cause on the medical side of the equation. And another side, just the last bullet on here, side benefit is prescribers in the state have to dial into this voice response unit as often as every 6 months if they want to get extension of benefits, which is, hey, I have a patient who needs to go beyond the prescription limits in the law, and that extension is good for 6 months, and every 6 months they have to do this relatively simple administrative process, and if you modify the program, you might make your life easier for your prescribing physicians. I asked Dwight to stay because it looked like he wrote my slide. The next thing I ran into was state-imposed limitation on the breadth of your PDL. I think your PDL should be broader. Held up against other states, it's not as broad as other states. And it begins with a very altruistic behavior of we want to have evidence-based medicine, evidence-based reasons for construction of our PDL. And sometimes in drug classes, there just isn't evidence. There's no clinical difference. And the class I'll offer to you is human growth hormone. It's an injectable drug. It's made by 9 manufacturers. Every one of those manufacturers makes exactly the same drug, somatotropin. So when we called Oregon, and I talked to the DERP folks in Oregon, I said, hey, can you review growth hormone? And they said, well, we can't, because we can only review classes where there's a clinical difference. And because the drug's the same, there's not going to be any clinical difference. And if you wed yourself to their reviews for construction of your PDL, you're going to miss classes that should be covered under the PDL. You should have a preferred and secondary preferred growth hormone, and you should have others that you put prior authorization in the way of. And if you did that, you'd get supplemental rebates for the 2 weeks deferred. And I think the university could do a fine job in doing a review of that class for you and helping that be an expansion class. It may require a change in law from state law. The other thing I noticed was our state fee-for-service population, not the private option population, but the population that's managed by the state, is about 500,000 lives. And in best practices of Medicaid rebate contracting, the best contracts go to groups that are 3 million lives and bigger. And 2 states that have very effective supplemental rebate contracts are Texas and Florida. One of them is 3 million lives, one of them is 4 million lives. There are ways for the state to take its fee-for-service 500,000 lives, join with other small and medium-sized states to become part of a larger purchasing pool. And joining those, although it has some trade-offs, you lose control, you're going to lose some control, you're going to lose some contract termination clauses that you might like, but you could improve your supplemental rebates by joining a multi-state rebate pool. This also, the reason I'm going to be able to go quickly is Dwight covered really nicely their kind of two main places for beneficiaries, physicians, and pharmacies to call if they have questions about the Medicaid program. You can call the university, and that tends to be for PDL determinations. I'm trying to get a drug that's not preferred, and they've got algorithms to help determine whether a non-preferred drug can be dispensed in this case. And they also manage a couple other clinical conditions that aren't related to PDL, but they're very clinical, and they do a great job with that. Magellan is saddled with the administrative calls. So they answer things like, I need an override to a claim edit that's probably driven off benefits, days supply, things that are very right in the benefit. And they're going to be excellent at answering those questions. But there's an opportunity to evaluate whether those two call centers need to be separate. You could evaluate whether one of those could expand or the other could expand, or whether a third party could handle those, and you could consider a competitive process to determine that. At a minimum, you would reduce the administrative duplications. You may find other efficiencies, like I mentioned, having technician call center representatives work next to pharmacist call center representatives. The cross-pollination tends to improve the ability to handle calls. This got mentioned twice today as well, but although copay differentials are the absolute difference is very small in your program, somewhere between $0 and $3 or 50 cents and $3. It's still important to align the copay differences with the different tiers in the PBM. So somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, maybe $1 difference would help them choose a generic drug, would help them choose a preferred drug over a not preferred drug. So I don't think we should just casually throw away the notion of, well, the cost differentials on an absolute basis are small, therefore not important. I think they're still important in influencing behavior. And in talking to one of the private option plans, they felt like they didn't have flexibility in being able to set the copay tiers that they had worked with in the private option program. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but if it is, we want to be sure to allow flexibility to align copay differentials with the choices we want people to make. Opiates came up this morning. John Steven mentioned that I was prepared to talk about opiates. I'll start with telling you that the United States represents 4.5% of the globe's population. So we're less than 5% of the globe's population. We consume 90% of all oral opiates on the globe. And I don't think that's because we hurt more in the U.S. So I'll start with, it's shocking in the U.S., I'm sure it's shocking here in Arkansas. As we peel into the pharmacy data, we'll be able to tell you more, but even at a high level, there appears to be 350,000 claims for oral opiates, almost 30,000 folks utilizing them on a regular basis. And you have this really great tool at your disposal, and it's called lock-in. And if you find somebody through the retro drug utilization review program who's clearly abusing opiates, you can lock them down and make sure they can only get their prescriptions filled at a single pharmacy. That's great. You have 70 beneficiaries locked in. Out of 28,000, that number seems small to me. Second thing that was missing from the really good pharmacy lock-in was there wasn't an associated prescriber lock-in. Best practice in other states and in commercial programs is you find somebody who's abusing oral opiates, you only let them go to a single prescriber and a single pharmacy. That's the best practice in managing opiate abusers. Further, 46 states you included have a statewide prescriber database where prescribers and fillers of prescriptions can enter information about patients who are receiving oral opiates and other controlled substances. It was interesting to me that the people who manage your fee-for-service program over at the state don't have access to that database. So as they're trying to find out who might be in need of lock-in, who might be in need of some special counseling, they can't even look into this important data source. And this data source is better than the claims data that you pay for. And a quick example I can give you is if I wanted to get, if I was an opiate abuser, I could cross state lines and I wouldn't show up, cross state lines and pay cash for a prescription, whether I was going to use the drugs in an abusive fashion or sell them. I also could go to Walmart and see if they're available on the $4 list and pay $4 cash. So there are ways that people can get, drug seekers can get opiates that don't show up in your claims data. So if you're only relying on your claims data to conduct your abuse program, you're missing an important source of data. So I'd encourage us to take a look at who has access to that, and clearly think the clinical folks in the office, the DHA, ought to have access to it. And my final slide was to reiterate my comments about vendor oversight at Cavasante that we covered about. So thank you very much. I'll be around the rest of the day if you have questions outside of this, or I'll take questions from the panel.
Okay, we've got, Representative Hammer, you've got a question?
Dude, just a point of clarification, I may be confused, but in the handout that was given this morning about the top 1,000 Arkansas Medicaid newly eligible high users, is the cost of prescriptions included in that?
Yes, it is. And we're going to be sending to the hospital chair the list of, the full list of those questions.
So we'll have a breakout as to how much it translates into Arkansas dollars on the basis of the top 1,000 users. Is that correct?
Yes, you will.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Senator Ervin, do you have a question? You're right now.
Okay, question, any reason why they aren't able to look at that?
I don't know the reason why, but I know that they don't have access to the state prescribing and dispensing data.
Okay. And then the locking in on the prescriber, I think that's an excellent idea. I mean, that is shocking, because before the prescription drug, is that utilized in other states?
Yes, it's also best practice in commercial drug abuse programs.
And then can that also be locked into, I don't know if it could, but you know, you have frequent flyers that go to emergency rooms a lot. Is there any other ways of looking at that? I don't know, you really can't lock somebody into that, but.
Yeah, and it's not likely that you're going out of the emergency room post-visit with, 30 hydrocodone. They may give you one while you're in for observation or treatment. If you then need 30 days supply of hydrocodone, you're going to have to go get it at a drugstore, and that's going to lock in before.
Okay, and then my last question was on the maintenance and the fact that I also like that recommendation, because we find that, and you're correct, right on with the medical pharmacy, on the limitation of prescriptions for adults. Would that also include antipsychotics on maintenance? Because you have high level, schizophrenia or whatever that are in need of more prescriptions sometimes because of the severe complications that arise. I mean, I can name a patient that is told, the boy says to walk and to drink water, and so he's constantly, not only do you have those medications, but you have the physical ramifications of the voices that are telling him, so he has lots of issues orthopedic-wise and sodium levels and all of that. It's a very complicated case, but we kind of run into those kinds of issues on the limitations of those prescriptions per month on certain patients like that.
I think for severely mental ill, you could think about the list constructed. Here's a general maintenance drug list. These drugs for diabetes, congestive heart failure, high cholesterol, those drugs clearly are on the exempt list. I think thoughtful people would want to get together and look at antidepressants in low doses and some of those to see if they met the criteria to be on this list. but second generation atypical antipsychotics clearly should be on the list. In fact, work I've done with antipsychotics, this is one class where if you miss as few as 9 or 10 days of therapy, 9 or 10 out of 365 days of therapy, two things happen to you. You're either incarcerated or you're in the hospital, both of which you pay for broadly. And you don't want either of those to happen. You really don't want any hurdles in the way of compliance for severely mental ill taking the antipsychotics.
Right, yeah, absolutely, no, we find that a lot.
And you have it today.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
program limits it today.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator Urban, the question you mentioned about the access to the prescription drug monitoring database, our call center would also benefit from that. So I call the pharmacist that oversees that, and I think it's at the health department, it's my understanding. And the answer we got was that their attorney wouldn't allow a practitioner that's not actually, has a patient relationship to see that. But, we're looking at claims and trying to make a determination if that's appropriate based on their opiate use.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because, I know we have, am I not correct that we have the ability outside of a provider-patient relationship to access that data?
I don't know specifically for
Is
that
correct?
database.
That ability?
The HIPAA, think about the HIPAA privacy rule.
Right.
Three people can see the data. The patient themselves or their legal guardian, anybody providing care, and anybody paying the claims. So if you can't see it as part of providing care, you certainly could see it as part of indirectly paying the claims.
Yeah, and we're going to begin taking claims for our state workers' comp program this fall, and that's heavy opiate use there, so we're going to need to see that. So I'm going to follow back up with them, see if their opinions change. That's what answer I was getting.
Okay, no, I appreciate following up on that.
Certainly, General Bledsoe. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Roy, I had a question for you. When you are talking to others around the country about pharmacy issues, how concerned are they about this opiate problem nationally?
Besides compounding pharmacy, in the realm of pharmacy, it's in the top two issues. It's a very important issue. I see big changes in the laboratory world, so, a good practice or best practice for a physician, general practitioner, or a pain specialist treating an oral opiate non-malignant patient is to get a random urine test. Two reasons: are they taking their medicine, so I actually want to see it in the urine, or is there no medicine in there and we think they're selling? The state-of-the-art, not the state-of-the-art, the current practice for that test is a qualitative yes or no, the chemical is in the urine. The best practice is a quantitative, here's how much was in the urine, and held up against other patients. Does it look like I just took a dose this morning and ran in for my urine test, or does it look like I've been taking this as prescribed over the last month? I think physicians' compliance to random urine drug testing is just modest in the country, and that feeds into the ability of patients or drug seekers to get these drugs.
And when you look at the state of Arkansas, I mean, you might not have the data exactly in front of you, but as far as an estimate, how would you think that we stack up as far as relative problem with this opiate prescription issue compared to other states?
Somebody mentioned the South this morning. I know we brought in the South, but I think Florida is clearly the winner in this game. The pill mills and internet distribution of opiates going on Florida is huge. But the South is kind of painted with that brush. So you're in that. I would imagine, and we're going to look, but if we stacked you up against opiate use, all 50 states, probably be in the top quartile.
And one last question, comment. You mentioned a couple of possible legislative fixes for this problem. Would you agree with this? My opinion on this issue is that we definitely need legislative fixes, but we also need to raise awareness of this issue so there's a cultural change within medical care so that local providers, we don't necessarily need to regulate every aspect of their their treatment for patients, but we certainly need to raise awareness so that we empower them to not give out medicines that patients might not be in their best interest, and to change the culture so that it makes it less acceptable to be giving prescription after prescription. Would you agree with that broadly?
Sure, and I wish I had a bullet point list of ways we could help grassroots to start that.
Yeah.
I think it's important, in support of just legislative changes.
Well, I appreciate your testimony. As an emergency physician, this is a huge issue in our emergency departments around the country and within our state. And I could reel off numerous anecdotes of patients and other cases I've been brought into where people have been prescribed these drugs inappropriately, sometimes by well-meaning providers that were pressured by folks that were their overseers because they wanted good patient satisfaction scores or because they didn't want to create waves. And had multiple bad outcomes from it. I'm thinking of one case off the top of my head of a 2-year-old that was run over in the front yard by a family member who was intoxicated by prescription drugs that were provided through a variety of physicians and wasn't being tracked. So it's an epidemic in our country, and I appreciate your testimony because I think it's a good thing for the task force to consider going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all we have on the list. Gentlemen, thank you all for some great information, and I'm sure that that's going to turn into some good recommendations to help. Okay, now we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. So we're going to ask the folks from Express Scripts to come up, Michael Harrell, Amy Bricker, and Krista Ward. Y'all would join us front. Members, you should have handouts, F1 and F2 in your packet. Are y'all going to use the PowerPoint too? Great. Okay. We're doing, we'll have another presentation from CDS after this. This is Express Scripts, so the F1 and F2 is the exhibit, and it's also up top. If y'all would just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your job, and then you're recognized to go through your presentation. And again, thank you for staying around for a long, exciting day. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. You know, it is interesting. You always, when you're going to be testifying, you always think that you want to follow everybody else, so you get to hear what's said until it's like 5 hours later. So we understand where all of you are. My name is Michael Harold, and I am Senior Director of State Government Affairs with Express Scripts. And I have with me today Amy Bricker, who is Vice President of Supply Chain Pricing for Express Scripts, and Krista Ward, who is Senior Director of Medicaid. And I've got a couple of slides that I want to go through, and then hopefully we can just dive into the meat of the presentation. But I just want to give you a little, to be sure you have a little bit of context of who we are. We do manage the prescription benefit on behalf of our clients that span from employers to health plans to unions to government health programs. We are the PBM for the Department of Defense. So we manage over, billions and billions of prescriptions. We have, over 1 billion prescriptions a year. We have tens of millions of patients. We've got probably over 80 million lives that are covered by our clients. So we have a really broad base of not only clients, but also data that we're able to gather that. Our business model is that we combine what we say behavioral sciences, clinical specialization, and actionable data. We call that health decision science. And that's not meant to just be a cute sounding thing. If any of you were to visit Express Scripts, you would see that we have all of those capacities coming together in a pretty intense way in which we use all of the data that we have to try to find the best way to put together the best programs for our clients, for them to make the best choices that are going to reduce the most effective cost as well as the best health outcomes. Our Arkansas clients, just as some context, include Arkansas Best, American Steel, Golden Living, Murphy Oil, and Murphy USA, Walmart, Windstream, and J.B. Hunt. So some pretty recognizable names there. Our clients in 2014, through our retail networks, we processed 5.7 million claims. So a lot of claims coming through there. And just as a point of context for the pharmacies that have been in our network over the last few years, you can see in 2013 there were 734, 2014 733. 2015, 759. That's through March of 2015. I have that date simply because that's when I last asked our people to check, and we're in the middle of some interesting issues going on here. But I believe Dr. Riley said earlier there were 791 pharmacies in Arkansas. So as you can see, as most PBMs tend to have 90 to 95% of pharmacies that are in their networks. I'll quickly go through this, but this is actually from our drug trend report, and it was referenced by Mr. Davis when comparing the drug trend to another group's national one. You will see definitely spikes in the last year, particularly in specialty. I'm sure Christy can probably talk about this a little bit later, but the biggest reason there is that you do have a lot of new specialty drugs that are coming in the marketplace. As Chairman Collins noted, these are amazing drugs, but they're also very expensive drugs, and there's got to be ways to try to figure out how to best get those to the right people at the best price possible. But one drug in particular, Sovaldia, a hepatitis C drug, is what hit the market this year and or last year, and which really created the spike in the 2014 data. I lobbied in Missouri as well, which is our home state, and for example, there I know that they had to have a $40 million special supplemental appropriation simply to cover that one drug, which made a lot of legislators really happy on the appropriations committee. But we've done some great work on that front. It's one of the examples that I think Krista will be able to talk about that we bring to the table. And then the other one is our prescription price index, simply keeping track of, since 2008, just like you have the consumer price index, it's an opportunity to show you that's what's in the middle, that generic drugs over this period of time continue to go down. Maybe not as steeply as they had, but it still continues to be the most cost-effective way to treat conditions. Yet at the same time, you will continue to see brand name drugs continue to go up in price, and that certainly can be continued to be boosted and bolstered by more and more specialty drugs that come on the marketplace. They do amazing things, but at a very costly price. With that, I will turn it over to Krista and just point out that we do not have any Medicaid business in Arkansas. We do not have, most of what we do in Medicaid is if we have a health plan client, and we don't have one that is operating in the private option. But we do work with Medicaid in other states with other clients, and as well as all the different tools that we have that we bring to bear, whether it's a Medicaid population, a commercial market, federal, Part D, whatever the case may be. So with that, I will let Chris talk about some of those tools and how they may apply to the things that you're talking about today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. So as Michael mentioned, we don't have any current Medicaid business in Arkansas right now. We don't serve fee-for-service Medicaid at all with our business model right now. But to give you an example of our Medicaid experience, we do have 41 different health plans in 23 different states. We are serving almost 6.9 million Medicaid members nationwide. So I think that gives us the benefit of a lot of different experiences and best practices that we bring to our Medicaid clients and also to states that might reach out to us for consultation. I think the other thing that PBMs bring to the table is the experience and benefit for managing employer commercial populations as well as Medicare Part D programs and other federal programs like the DoD. So when you're thinking about a PBM, don't think about us just as working with Medicaid plans, but think about us also as working with all those other entities to bring the best practices and experiences of those entities to you for recommendations and things that we could implement with a fee-for-service Medicaid program or a standalone PBM entity. When you talk about capabilities, I think there are a lot of different tools that we can use. One of the questions we heard earlier was, how is Medicaid different than private insurance, or how are the tools and solutions that you employ different? And I think what we would say is a lot of the tools and solutions are similar, but they might be executed differently. And that's based either on our client's recommendation or based on state requirements. So for example, some of the best practices that we've noted in either other state Medicaid programs or with our health plan or commercial clients is a brand generic dispensing fee. So instead of having a universal dispensing fee, have different dispensing fees where you could incent the use of generic drugs. Another one is tight utilization management or the use of prior authorizations to control access to those high-cost drugs or classes where there are multiple drugs, and you want to make sure that the patient is receiving the best care at the most appropriate price. Formulary management is also another tool that we use. Our formularies are based on clinical evidence and aren't influenced by price. So at Express Scripts, when we develop our formularies, the teams evaluating price of drugs and also clinical evidence are two completely separate teams, and they don't talk about what goes on the formulary in the same room. In fact, price doesn't influence what is put on the formulary as it relates to clinical value. I think another huge benefit that we bring to the table is specialty clinical support. So some of you may be familiar with our specialty pharmacy at Credo. You may not be familiar with our therapeutic resource centers. These are 15 different centers focused on specific disease states. For example, some of the ones that influence Medicaid the most are diabetes, asthma, or other pulmonary conditions, HIV, hepatitis, high cholesterol. We have therapeutic resource centers with specially trained pharmacists that focus day in, day out only on patients in their therapy class. So for example, if you went to talk to somebody in our diabetes TRC, that pharmacist deals only with diabetes patients every single day. In fact, when we talk with our TRC pharmacists, they aren't limited in the amount of time that they can spend with a patient, which really enables them to provide good support that those patients may not get in another setting because they might be time limited or perhaps they don't feel comfortable sharing their individual personal details in that type of setting. These specialty pharmacists train only in these classes. So when they're first brought on board to work in these therapeutic resource centers, they go through a minimum of 250 hours of education specific to that therapy class. That's more training than most pharmacists will receive in a single therapy class in all of pharmacy school. So they are best educated to help these members, and they can deal with things like influence based on their minority health conditions or influence based on what population they are from, for example, Medicare and Medicaid. We also have network solutions like quality-based networks to make sure that our pharmacies are based on outcomes instead of based on what drug they dispense. We also have very sophisticated fall waste misuse models that are basically predictive algorithms that help identify fraud patterns based on national trends as well as things that we're seeing at a market level. In addition to these capabilities, I think one of the most important things has been demonstrated in our advocacy and fight against high-cost drugs such as Sovaldi. So with our size alone, our PBM was single-handedly able to influence the cost of hepatitis C for all programs. Because we stood up and took a stand, it lowered the cost of hepatitis C for everybody else after it, regardless of which drug you chose, Actirapac, Sovaldi, or Romeo or Lizio. Those are the types of things that PBMs can bring to you and to the market as a whole. And those are in addition to the capabilities, including claims processing, formulary management, and clinical rule evaluation. On slide 7, if we go to the next slide, Michael, we'll show you the influence that we can have with clients based on how tightly they want to manage their benefit. So in this slide, this is a study done by our Express Scripts lab for clients who manage their benefits. And what you can see here is that with every single program they implement, whether it's step therapy or utilization management, co-pay differentials, channel management, network, every single program decreases their spend. And so if you look at the tightly managed category, these are clients who have implemented 4 or more solutions. those clients are saving on average 30% per member, and they have almost zero trend.
Krista, could you just help me? I want to try and apply this to our specific situation. So Arkansas Medicaid today, would we be unmanaged, managed, or tightly managed?
We would have to evaluate you, but you probably straddle somewhere between unmanaged and managed.
And what you're suggesting is there's the potential, if that were true, to move ourselves somewhere between managed and tightly managed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
What we see with some of our health plan clients is that they bridge more between the managed or tightly managed. So a lot of those programs we implement as best practice from day one with those health plans. And we are constantly looking for ways to innovate and create more programs with them specific to their population. And now we're looking at subpopulations within Medicaid. So how do we manage the TANF population from the CHIP population, from the ABD population, to make sure that those programs and solutions have the most value. All right, and then we go to the last slide. One of the things that we want to highlight here is these savings estimates and ability to manage trend are inherently influenced by the types of regulations that we face at a state level. So there are things like any willing provider laws, limiting the use of exclusive networks, especially for specialty drugs, and states mandating the formularies that can have a significant impact on how much we can save health plans and ultimately the state. So as you consider different types of regulations, one of the things you consider is the impact that you're going to have on your ability to save money in your own program.
Again, just for kind of for Arkansas specific, you've got these 4 buckets. Have you guys looked at us? Where do we stand on these 4 things in Arkansas?
I think right now it will be hard to say because you're not using health plans to manage your benefit. So one of the things that we see is in a state that would move to a health plan model, say you would subcontract the benefit of managing your Medicaid benefit to 3 health plans. If you then said to them, but we're going to tell you what drugs that you will pay for on the formulary, we're going to tell you what PA criteria you're going to use, you are limiting their ability to help control your drug spend because you've taken, in essence, that ability away from them. Does that make sense? Answer your question. All right, with that, do you want to open up to any additional questions?
Yeah, could you just kind of go over this last slide one more time? What message are we trying to convey here? Again, I guess what I'm trying to see is there a continuum from different levels of management, or what are we talking about here?
So I think as you're using a health plan type model where you're considering, let's say, moving benefit management into health plan or private insurance, as you start to do those types of initiatives, if you enact any willing provider laws, you're reducing the potential competition between health plans and between pharmacies to come up with innovative solutions for you or innovative reimbursement models. If you limit the use of exclusive networks, for example, limiting the use of an exclusive specialty network, you are in essence allowing the patients to go to both retail and a specialty pharmacy, and the specialty pharmacy might be best able to provide a higher quality of care for those members, which will, one, save you money, but also ensure better patient outcome. Patients are more likely to be adherent using a specialty care management approach. And I think as we heard earlier this morning, your spend on case management and care management is quite low. Using a specialty pharmacy is one way to get that care management without having to spend an additional fee to pay for that case management.
Thank you. Representative Hammer and then Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of two different kinds of questions. Number one, on the terms of the unmanaged, managed, and tightly managed, those definitions, are they universally used in the industry, or are those created by Express Script to capture what you're trying to share with us?
They were created by Express Scripts for this study, so we try to group clients into 3 major categories based on their benefit design, and to avoid, massive amounts of data, we just group them into 3 buckets.
Okay, I don't want to take the time today, but I'm wondering, could you provide to at least me and if the chairs want the committee, maybe a description of how, because if you set the terminology if you set the definition for the terminology, I'd like to know what you went into that definition so we could do an apples to apples comparison, if you would please.
Absolutely.
And then the second one is, there's a issue going on in the state of Arkansas with some of the private pharmacies and a contract that they were recently asked to, sign. It's kind of a controversial thing. So what I'm wondering is, if I understand right, you tell me if I'm wrong, but y'all are here basically making a pitch for us to consider using this as a means to, Arkansas to do business in the prescription world. So what I'm wondering is, if the independent pharmacies have been kind of boxed into a corner, what's to say we as a state wouldn't eventually get boxed into the corner just like they've been boxed into it, and us arrive at the same result as they are? Or am I way off base? Feel free to call me out if I am.
Hi, my name is Amy Bricker. I'm the Vice President of Supply Chain Pricing at Express Scripts, and I appreciate the question and the opportunity to address what the MAC law does to Express Scripts and our clients. Given the legislation, and again, diving into some specific points that the legislation requires of Express Scripts, we did have to recontract with a number of the pharmacies in Arkansas. You referenced independent pharmacies. We had, pretty good response, I will say, early on. The contract spoke specifically to aspects of the legislation, such as appeals. It actually provided some assurance with respect to reimbursement. What we heard from Dr. Riley's testimony early this morning was that, predictability was a concern of pharmacies. And so this contract actually does provide predictability and reimbursement. Unfortunately, over half of those independent pharmacies have decided not to pursue a contract with Express Scripts. And so it will result in disruption of many members, many of your constituents in Arkansas, because those pharmacies are not negotiating with Express.
Mr. Chair, I'd like latitude to continue at your allowance. Thank you. So we've got half the pharmacies in Arkansas, because they didn't sign a contract with y'all, that are now not going to be able to deliver product. Is that, or they're going to have to go to somebody else if that's allowed? Is that the long and short of it?
Yes, roughly 20,000 Arkansas members covered by Express Scripts will receive letters this week directing them to a new pharmacy because those pharmacies that did not sign their contract are no longer in network.
Was that contract issued in any of the other 49 states or just Arkansas?
It was a direct result of the Arkansas MAC bill.
So anything that we would choose to do as a legislative body, and I'm just trying to think, problematic moving forward, anything that we would choose to do as a legislative body that Express Script didn't like, Express Script didn't like, or any other PBM that we might choose to do business with, would that be the common practice of how you would react to the legislative body?
And what I will say is that there's MAC legislation in a number of states, and Express Scripts has always been and will continue to be compliant with the law, first and foremost. This law was very different, and what is expected of Express Scripts, specifically knowing wholesaler invoice prices, things that, that's in the free market and confidential, and we don't have access to pharmacy contracts with our wholesalers. And so we had to, one, address that in contract, and two, we had to make sure that our clients, their costs were able to be contained. And so the approach that we took in response to that legislation was to address those two aspects specifically.
Last question. So if we as a state were to try to negotiate, such as you do with private, with pharmacies, we would basically be in the same position as a customer in dealing with you. Is that right or wrong in what you just said as it would apply?
I'm not sure that I understand your question.
You're going to treat us the same way you treated the pharmacies if we as a state get into a negotiated contract with you.
I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to when you say treat you the same as I'm treating the pharmacies.
the way the pharmacies have been treated is they had signed contract or you were gonna pull the business. You said that it was partly because of protected information, which I understand and respect that, but as a state, if we were to get into some kind of working arrangement with a firm like yours, then the rules aren't going to be any different than what were applied to the private pharmacists as it would be to us as a state in whatever contract we worked out with you.
We would negotiate with this state as we would any other. Actually, we wouldn't be negotiating directly with the state, but with our health plans.
Okay.
All right. And Representative Hammer, if I just can add, I mean, I want to reiterate again and again that what we do is because of the clients that we do have, and it is our duty to help them control their drug costs, the choices they make, and that filters down to the cost that comes to their members. So the action that we took was in that context. If we happen to have a contract with the state, then the state is a client, and we work with the client to address the types of laws that states may enact.
Yeah, obviously we've crossed into the debate about the MAC bill, and I think a couple things are going to be of value here. First off, I think it'd be good for one of you all to clearly explain why the contract was changed, because of what impact the law had on your ability to do business in Arkansas and how it compares to surrounding states. And just as a comment, I think, as a guy who does business in Arkansas, I think one could also view this as when the state comes in and starts messing with the private market's going to respond. And that's what we've seen happen here. So I think it's important for all of us to understand exactly what the impacts of this legislation are on the market and what the response is going to be. Because, and I think, again, we might find out that any industry is going to respond when the changes that we make have an impact on. So would you all just kind of clarify at this point, and then I know we've got 2 or 3 people who want to ask some questions about that, about why the contract was modified, what's different about, what we do now in Arkansas versus the surrounding states, and why they're not being asked to sign a similar contract, and why you felt, again, it was necessary to respond that way.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So from a financial perspective, the law requires that I uphold and appeal if a pharmacy is not able to purchase or acquire a drug at or below the MAC price. And so traditionally, I will say Express Scripts does not ever set pricing knowingly below pharmacy costs. MAC, though, is established based on what we believe the market and pharmacies that are similarly situated, so all independents, for this example, could buy drug at. Now there is absolutely zero incentive for the pharmacy to actually be smart buyers. This law protects them. They can, stop negotiating altogether with wholesalers if they so chose, because again, Express Scripts is required, and all PBMs is required to reimbursement above their cost. And so our approach and the way that we responded to the legislation was to provide the pharmacies a reimbursement that, essentially a guarantee on their reimbursement. It actually helps them in negotiating with wholesalers, and it protects our clients because then it's not an open-ended free-for-all, if you will, on reimbursement. And so from a financial perspective, that was the one aspect. The other was, as a PBM, and when you're appealing a claim, I don't actually want to know your cost. That's confidential, and again, in the free market, I don't want to know that. But because the law specifically says I have to reimburse above invoice, the contract says you need to submit your invoice to Express Scripts if you want to appeal a claim. And so there were some aspects, again, of the legislation that are not normal or I shouldn't say best practice, and so we had to address those in the contract.
All right, thank you, that's helpful. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure where to start. The original question I had, I don't even remember it. Back over here somewhere after Representative Hammer got started, but it was my bill, and you guys all know me and recognize me, that ran last time, and Senator Caldwell, and I had intended not to talk about that contract or that bill, but since it has been brought up and I've heard your responses, A couple of things I would like to say is that contract is deemed by most pharmacists as punitive because they stood up to you guys, because you're so big. It's a punitive contract. It's also my understanding that that contract was not, it's an addendum to their original contract, and I have read it, that it was not offered to change, just independent pharmacies, again, which deems it to be punitive. And to Representative Hammer's question, our problem is if you guys were to come in and run our Medicaid program, when you don't like something that the state legislature does to try and protect itself, what are you going to do punitively to us? I think that's his question. You know, and you say that you never put your MAC prices lower than what normally are on purpose. Well, I've got Magellan sitting right over here, and it's my understanding that they manage their MAC pricing for Medicaid for the state of Arkansas. It's rare that they have an appeal because their MAC pricing is generally very fair. So I'm trying to figure out how I've got one company who can provide MAC pricing generally fairly to where I don't have a complaint from a pharmacist in the single state. I have asked a lot, and I get complaints daily from you guys. So I guess my first of probably 3 questions, if I'm allowed that, is you say you don't manipulate the prices on purpose, but I have documentation of people that can prove otherwise. Can you respond to that? Why one company who manages Medicaid doesn't? That's not any standard practice that they do, but it's a standard practice for you to the point that my pharmacists are even tired of trying to appeal. That's why that MAC bill is in place, is to protect the deceptive trade practices that you guys were doing to the state. Normally we don't like to get involved, and I'm one that would never get involved in private contracts unless I feel that they're deceptive. And so that's why that was put in place. And so this addendum to the contract that you guys put out there was punitive, not only to them, but to us, the legislature. What you're saying, and now I'm getting wound up, and I will stop and get to a question, but what you're saying by doing that is saying, we don't respect you as a legislative body, and we're going to do whatever we have to do to get around this legislation. So it wouldn't have mattered what legislation we put through, you would not have followed by the rules. And I had talked to your lobbyists earlier today and asked that we give this a 6-month try. If it doesn't work, whatever pieces don't work, we'll go back and fix. But when I hear you guys sit up there and talk the way you talked about things that aren't true, it's very hard for me to even want to do that. There's no incentive for the pharmacies to buy it or lower cost. That's completely not true, because on appeal, the only thing they're getting on appeal is cost. They're not getting anything above cost, which is what they need to operate on. So they're always wanting to buy at lower cost, because the lower cost they can buy it at, the higher profits they will realize. Back to my original question, thank you for letting me vent. You guys talk about therapeutic resources, and you have pharmacists that go through a lot of training to be able to, I guess, counsel people on therapy and regimens. And they go through 240 hours of training, which is more than pharmacists do. I guess my question would be, I feel like to some degree, you guys as a market, you keep consuming our pieces. And so you're consuming what a pharmacist normally does. When I normally go to the pharmacy, they would counsel me on that medication, what any interactions could be. And that's also something that my physician would do up front. So I would have already gotten counseled twice, and then you guys come in and do it again. It just seems like we're paying for the same service at multiple levels, and it's, in my opinion, we could peel that onion away and save so much money. Can you tell me why that therapeutic pharmacist is necessary?
So, let me give you an example of how the Therapeutic Resource Center works. I think hopefully you'll see the value of it. So, in addition to dispensing the medication from a pre-dose specialty pharmacist, the members has access to a specialist pharmacist that deals only in their condition. That specialist pharmacist not only reviews the prescription, just like other retail pharmacy prescriptions, but they do have more experience because that's what they're dealing with every single day. So as an example, one of our oncology pharmacists received a prescription for a child that was about 5 years old. And specifically, this oncology agent was based on weight. When the oncology pharmacist looked at the prescription, he thought that the way it was written was too high a dose for the member.
specifically this number could not possibly be the right weight to need that type of medication. And this medication is one that, if taken in that quantity, would kill that child. That pharmacist initially looked at the prescription and said, I'm not sure if I'm reading this correctly, so he took it to another oncology pharmacist and said, are you reading this the same way? And his peer said, yes, I'm reading it the same way, you need to call the doctor back. So they got on the phone with the doctor and said, I want to make sure that I'm understanding this prescription appropriately. Based on what I see day in and day out with people writing this prescription, I think this dose is written incorrectly. And the doctor said, I'm so sorry, that prescription is written incorrectly. Basically saved this child's life from being, by reviewing the dose incorrectly. I'm not saying that a retail pharmacist couldn't have that same experience. What I'm saying is an oncology pharmacist deals only with those types of prescriptions every single day. They know what looks like an abnormality versus dealing with patients who, one might have HIV, one might have diabetes, and you might have 5 others that just need regular maintenance medications. That's the value that Express Scripts brings with that consultative service that I think is unique. And you're not paying extra for it. You get it at the time that your prescription is dispensed for free.
Well, nothing's for free. You get it in what you charge the employer and the patient. I mean, it's all included in that one price. So technically, it's not for free, but
Representative Gray, I mean, so we're a business.
yes.
Which is, I mean, it's a pro-business state. So we've invested a lot into every aspect of our business. And if we can put together programs that we can attempt to sell to our clients that say, I can get your drug for 10-15% lower cost. I can get that through my specialty network. I can increase adherence between 10 and 15%, and I can increase the health outcome. We ought to be able to do that, right? And the client ought to be able to choose that you have put before me a product and an offering that is most beneficial to me for the benefits that I'm offering to my employees. And so that's what we're doing. I understand you can say that it's like we're gobbling up more, but I think we only gobble when we bring extra value that we have to sell the benefits of that value to our clients in a competitive market.
And I completely agree with you on that. From a standpoint of being
Okay, what I'm going to ask is let's get back to a question and answer type of format here. So Representative Goodwin, ask your question and you guys respond to the question.
Okay, and this will be my final question on this. And I completely agree with what you're saying. From a physician standpoint, what I see, like with the medication therapies, maybe I'm talking two different things, is that we'll get, requests that this is contraindicated or that this person hasn't taken their medication in 2 weeks or whatever. It just seems it's an added layer that we already know what the contraindications are. They know, and the pharmacist will call us if a prescription's not been filled, and it's something that should have been filled, or if there's an issue. So maybe when you were talking about the patient that was a chemotherapy drug, how do you guys know about that? Is it like when the claim is submitted through a pharmacy, or when you're talking about, I really want to understand the Therapeutic Resource Center. I guess I'm trying to figure out where does that come into play? And I understand it could be a cost-saving issue, just don't understand it.
So there's a couple of different factors. One is review of claims history. So those pharmacists have access to claims history and can see if you've been refilling your medication appropriately. The second is that linked into those specialty pharmacies or clinical programs. So for example, one is called ScreenRx, and it's an adherence model. It uses over 600 different factors that we know about you to predict if you're going to be non-adherent. And so there's a score that's assigned to each member, and the pharmacist can see that score when the member calls in. So then they can look at the patient's history and say, oh, I see you haven't taken your medication, you haven't refilled, and it should have been refilled. And we talk about why you're not taking your medication or why you're not refilling it. Sometimes it's clinical, they're having a side effect, and so then they can counsel them on that, right? Other times it's that they can't afford the co-pays. And so then they can work with them to get a patient assistance program and figure out if the medication needs to be changed to a lower cost drug. Sometimes it's just that they couldn't get to the pharmacy. So maybe it's using something like home delivery so they don't have to worry about going to a pharmacy. There's lots of different reasons, but that's one of the additional benefits that they get from using that pharmacy that may not be available through other channels. That's one clinical solution. There's a lot more. We look at medical claims data and pharmacy claims data and send alerts to the doctor, call the doctor, and have a conversation with them. Does that answer your question? Chair Hendrick, may I also respond to Representative Gray's questions about contracts? Representative Gray, you mentioned that you felt that contract was punitive. We wholeheartedly disagree. You mentioned that it wasn't sent to chain pharmacies. Our chain pharmacy contract, albeit confidential, addressed what we addressed in contract with the independent. So actually, we put the independent market on a level playing field with respect to reimbursement. I can't speak to what Magellan does, nor could they speak to what Express Scripts does. But what I can share with you is that I've received 0.03% of appeals of all claims processed in Arkansas. And so while pharmacists may very well be sharing something with you, they're not sharing that with Express Scripts.
Okay, Surgeon General Bledsoe.
I just have a couple of quick questions. So one of the things that I've been concerned about is that if you have a contract and it is negotiated with the local pharmacist at a certain rate, and the drug costs go up for that pharmaceutical drug, do you guys go back and renegotiate those, or does that flat fee stay the same? So if I, for instance, the drug doxycycline is a drug that I prescribed for years. It used to be dirt cheap, and for whatever reason, about 2 years ago, it climbed astronomically. So if you have a contract where you're reimbursing the local pharmacist at $10 or $20, whatever it is, and suddenly the drug climbs by 100%, or 200%, do you go back and renegotiate that with the local pharmacist, or what happens when that occurs?
Senator, excuse me. What I will say is that our contracts aren't at the drug level. So MAC was the mechanism by which we respond to the market. And so when there's a shortage, when there's a price increase, that's what MAC effectively did. The new contract that's been proposed actually provides a guarantee, a minimum reimbursement, if you will. So it no longer is MAC, it's actually a percentage. And an individual drug, albeit, that was the only drug that they filled, which would be doubtful that could impact that discount, but overall, we're asking for the pharmacist to agree to an overall discount in generics.
So in other words, for specific drugs, you might not raise the reimbursement rate.
Correct. So it's not, the discount is not on every single drug, it's an aggregate for all drugs.
Okay. The second question I have is, I know you provide a lot of benefit to big corporations in our state, and we're very sensitive to that because we want to be a pro-business state, and we also want to support the corporations that do so much for our folks here in Arkansas. But do you guys have any employees in the state of Arkansas? Anyone that's directly employed by Express Scripts who lives in the state?
I think we may have 30-some, so we do not have much of a presence in Arkansas.
Okay. All right, that's all my questions.
Senator Caldwell. You need to push your button there again.
There we go. All right, Ms. Bricker, you made a couple of statements about the contract. One, that it was not punitive, yet did the contract not state that if the law went away, the contract would go away, the addendum to the contract would go away? Is that not the insinuation that you've given retail pharmacists?
Senator, yes. So
Yeah.
it was in direct response to the legislation.
That's
If
right.
the legislation did not exist, then the addendum would not be in effect. Yes.
And then you made the statement that you negotiated with the retail pharmacies on this contract. If they got this contract just a few weeks before it had to be signed and returned, would you explain to me when and where you negotiated with these pharmacists and how that came about?
Certainly, Senator. So in common practice, all of these pharmacists, if you ask them to come up, would tell you that a 2-week turnaround for contracts is typical within in dealing with Express Scripts anyway. And so it took us quite some time to get our arms around what the legislation required. And so once we fully understood the obligations of Express Scripts, we embarked on, trying to then contract with those pharmacies. What I will tell you is that early
Well,
on.
but you said that you negotiated with these pharmacies, and I would like to know how many pharmacies showed up for these negotiations, where you held them, and how long they lasted. Because in reality, you didn't negotiate with pharmacies, you sent a contract, and basically it was a take it or leave it proposition.
Senator, I disagree with you. It is not take it or leave it. It never has been, nor will it ever be. Our negotiations are held in private. They are not done in a forum such as this. And so each and every pharmacy that we solicited has our phone number and has access to someone that can help them through that negotiation. Initially, we had a great response. Over 100 pharmacies of the 400 signed or called with questions, and then it stopped. We understand that the Pharmacy Association in the state sent out a quote analysis of our contract, and in turn, pharmacists got confused and got scared, and so they stopped signing. We reached out to many who just basically said, I don't understand. We helped them to understand what the contract meant, and in turn, they signed. And so I'm happy to say that we have just nearly half of those independent pharmacies contracted, but again, over 200 have opted not to do so.
So, in this negotiation, were any changes made in the contract?
Yes, Senator. That's part of the negotiation, sure.
Okay. Now, you're talking about your clients that you have, Arkansas Steel, Arkansas Best, Murphy Oil, and the rest. When you negotiate your contracts with these companies, it was brought out in testimony when this bill was brought before committee that the PBMs have filled or have reimbursed their company stores more money than they reimbursed the drugstores in Arkansas. Are your companies disclosed? You disclose that to your clients?
Senator, I'm not sure I understand your question. I don't have.
The question is that during testimony on this bill back in session, it was revealed that company stores where you fill prescriptions at your mail order have been reimbursing prescriptions at a higher rate than what your company would reimburse retail drugstores in Arkansas. That was one of the things that was put in the bill. Do you disclose that to your clients, that when you may change them over to mail order prescriptions, that they may pay a higher rate for that medicine than they could buy at a retail store in Arkansas?
So, Senator, I will tell you as a practice, we never we never bill a client at a retail pharmacy, or I should say a mail pharmacy differently than retail. In other words, they're not going to pay more at mail than they would at retail as a general practice. Our clients have guarantees both at mail and at retail, and so they do understand what they will pay given the channel.
There was different testimony in committee meeting, and one example was used was one mail order PBM paid itself $142 for a service that reimbursed a retail drugstore $46 for the same service. And that is why that was written in the bill. And you're sitting here saying that Express Scripts never, and use the word never, paid itself more, reimburses its company store, its mail order store, more money than it reimburses a retail store.
So, Senator, I'm not going to stand before you and say it's never happened. It's not our practice to do so. Our practice is to drive the cost out of the market to the extent that we think the market can bear. And so it's not in our best interest to charge our clients more for mail than it is at retail.
One more question, I'll be through. You negotiate your contracts with your clients, and you negotiate with the manufacturers of the drugstore, of the prescriptions, and then you negotiate with your pharmacies, and now you're negotiating with the state. Do you have any fiduciary responsibility to see that any and all of these people are being treated fairly.
So we are not a fiduciary.
Thank you.
Treated fairly, I would need you to clarify what that means, but we are not a fiduciary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, may I make one comment about, may I make one follow-up comment? And I feel like I can maybe do this in the middle of the interim as opposed to the middle of the session, but Senator, I was here, we talked. You did cite the example about what PBM mail order was reimbursed versus what a retail was reimbursed. The frustrating thing to me is that you cited it again and again, and I never got to see what that was to verify it. It actually wasn't my company. So it's frustrating and difficult to try to respond to something like that.
And it's happened again in the last few weeks.
Well, and I don't know if I could have even asked, was that a 30-day script versus a 90-day script? And if you did the math, you know, I mean, I just don't know. What I do know is that in states where we've been able to not do it in anecdote as much, but to have more concrete examples that could be looked at, that it's been easier to try to reach consensus in some type of agreement. And I understand where you're coming from, and I would only say that for us to respond to charges and accusations that we're never able to see the evidence of is a very difficult thing to do.
And the other, since you brought that up, the other thing I would bring to the record today is the fact that on generic drugs, dealing with the PBMs, that y'all get to set the cost and the retail both on generic drugs and have caused many people to fill prescriptions at a loss. It is written in your contract that the pharmacies have to fill prescriptions even at a loss. You testified earlier that there were 791 pharmacies in Arkansas, and I would dare say that you can name one that has not had to fill a prescription at a loss because of your contract. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I just want to, you know, again, this whole thing is obviously kind of getting off course here, but I will say that when this bill went through the legislature and there was a lot of questions brought up about it, one of the things that was committed was that we would discuss this at this task force, and that's why we're allowing this discussion to occur. I guess I just want to clarify one thing again. I'm still trying to grasp what we're struggling with here. You all are a private company, correct?
Publicly traded, yes.
Publicly traded, but you have shareholders, and your job is to make a return to the shareholders. And you don't make anybody sign a contract.
No, we don't.
It's their choice whether they choose to do business with you, or if they don't like your business practices, to go do either with another PBM or not do them at all.
That's correct, and they are always open to negotiate.
And as far as setting prices different for different customers, I mean, we speak about that like that is somehow unethical. I do it every day in my business. If somebody buys 10 truckloads, I sell them cheaper than someone who buys 1 truckload. That's how business works. And if the government were to pass a law that required me to sell them for the same price for 1 truckload versus 10 truckload, I'd probably raise my 10 truckload price by 1 truckload. I mean, it's just the way business is going to respond to government intervention. And I think, again, I understand the motivation and the frustration many of us have, but it's philosophical. I look at this and I see us getting in the middle of a private company's business model and asking them business about their contracts. I come back to a question about, is it really any of our business? Now, obviously, if they want to come do business with the state of Arkansas as a customer providing Medicaid or other services, then it's certainly a different situation. But
well, if they're as good as we seem to think they are at it, it sounds like there's some cost saving opportunity. So the challenge is to figure out how we get a proper balance, because I know it's emotional for all of us on all sides, and we use words like punitive, but depending on whose seat you sit in, you can always feel like what the other person did to you is punitive. For example, you might feel the Arkansas law was punitive. A pharmacist might feel that your contract was punitive, etc., etc. So if we're going to try and get to a place for this group to make reforms to our Medicaid program so that we're lowering costs, we're improving efficiency, we're reforming the program, the challenge for us, I think, is going to be to set aside some of our emotions, and I'm as guilty as the next person there, and try and get some numbers on the table and say to ourselves, are we fighting for the taxpayers of Arkansas primarily? And if we are, what can we do with the Medicaid program to help move us to good outcomes at the least possible cost, done in a transitional form that everybody can adjust to and feel good about?
Okay, we've got two more on the list here. Senator Urban, you recognize?
I just have a quick question on the, so if they don't fund the contract, and so what happens with the, what's the letter that is sent out to your customers, and then what's required of them? Can they drop out of Express Scripts, or is that determined with their insurance plan? My concern is access to the pharmacy, and how that might limit them to access a pharmacy in rural areas. So could you address that, and does that person then have the ability to go to a pharmacist and drop Express Scripts as their provider?
Senator, so the question around mailings, a couple of mailings went out. So our clients that were impacted, not Medicare, not TRICARE, because of federal preemption. All other commercial clients, there were 657 clients that were impacted, some not even in the state. So we have, companies in surrounding states that fill prescriptions in Arkansas. They were all notified this week that there would be disruption. Monday of this week, every member that was impacted that will no longer be able to use those pharmacies, those letters went out. Again, it just happened on Monday. From an access perspective, that was first and foremost in our minds. Our commercial clients don't have the same standards as, say, CMS does, but we actually applied the CMS standards to our commercial base when we were evaluating, the access requirements in the state. And actually, it was quite small. We only needed 5% of all the independent pharmacies in the state to meet those access requirements. And so we were well above that. But yeah, to answer your question, those members impacted will have to find another pharmacy. Typically, they will not be able to disenroll from Express Scripts because we're not a B2C company. We are contracted with our clients who then have those beneficiaries enrolled.
Okay, so they would have to take it up with their insurance company, insurance provider, basically.
That's correct.
That's what they would have to do. Is there any area in Arkansas where it basically limits them from any pharmacy within the area where they have to drive like 30 minutes to an hour to pick up their meds?
The CMS standard for rural areas is 1 in 15 miles. You have to meet that access standard 70% of the time. And so it just depends, it would depend on the individual enrollee as to where they live. But we did exceed the 1 in 15 based on CMS guidelines.
Okay, so there's not any area in Arkansas that you know of where that would be an issue for a client, where they would basically be without a pharmacy in their town that they live in? Are you aware of any?
I'm not, to answer your question directly, I don't know if there's an issue in a specific town, but based on mileage, we're not aware of an issue.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Senator Ingram, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your free market attitude, no question about that. But when certain industries grow so large that they can become monopolistic and they can dictate terms instead of negotiate terms, I think that was the basis for the Sherman Antitrust Act. So I can appreciate both sides of this free market, but there is another side that certain entities can manipulate the market. They can dictate to the people that they're doing business with. So I appreciate your comments about free enterprise, but our government, we do live by the Sherman Antitrust Act as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may note that when Express Scripts acquired Medco several years ago, there was extensive review by Obama's FTC and of the attorney generals from around the country, and there were no issues that were raised, or if there were negotiations and something may have been sold off in a certain market, but we have passed that muster.
Okay. Senator Irving, you have a another question?
Just to follow up on what Senator Ingram said, because you have listed anyone firewalls, and that's a sticky topic. And limiting and narrowing networks is again a sticky topic because it does allow for monopolization to occur in a lot of areas where corporations just get bigger and bigger and bigger and wealthier, and the independent people just go out of business. So, you know, that's, again, you're in the business of, so I was just curious, because we do have that law on the books, and there are many people in this room, not me, but others that fought really hard to get that law established in Arkansas. So just wanted to kind of, if you don't mind, on your last slide here, going through that and what you see for Arkansas, because I know it's a hot topic and there's a lot of people trying to get rid of those laws all across the country.
So to address your question, Senator, I think if Arkansas was going to use, let's say, health plans to manage their Medicaid business, where health planners would then contract with pharmacies and pharmacy networks, one of the ways that enrolling provider laws will affect savings is that the larger the network of pharmacies, the more the client pays. Yes, in narrowing the network, some pharmacies will be removed from that network, but I wouldn't say that all of our narrow networks consist only of chains. There are independent pharmacies in those narrow networks. Narrow networks are based on the client's geography, who they might select to participate in the network, and what they need to meet state access requirements. So in no instance in a Medicaid benefit would we ever be able to restrict a network to be to create less access than what you define.
Okay, because that would be a concern for me if we did contract or manage or partner, because that we need people to be able to see Medicaid recipients, and that is, we do not have an oversupply of that. So that's concerning for me.
That's right. And as the client, you would dictate the network that you desire, right? So not every one of our clients wants a narrow network. That's your choice. As our client, you tell us what benefit you want us to administer on your behalf.
Senator Ingram, you got another question here about the No, I was hoping you did. Okay, that's all we have on the list. Do you all have anything else you'd like to add, or?
No, I just thank you. You know, we appreciate the opportunity to be here today and talk about the types of tools that we have. I can guarantee you we have never talked about our contracts in a public forum like this ever, and I hope we never have to, but we do understand the seriousness, and we are trying to be as transparent in what we can say in public as possible, and we think there's a debate to still be had about these issues, and we don't do it out of disrespect. We do nothing to disrespect this legislature, Representative Gray, etc. But we are trying to protect the interest of our clients who pay us.
Well, we thank you for showing up, taking some tough questions, and we appreciate it. And we're going to excuse you all, and we're going to move on to CDS. We have Representative Ann Linder. Ladies, just identify yourself and tell us what you do, and you're recognized.
Thank you. I'm Catherine Bell. I'm Catherine Bell, I'm Regional Director of Government Affairs with CDS Health. I've met many of y'all before. Thank you for having us. We appreciate the opportunity.
Sure, my name is Ann Winter. I'm Senior Director for Operations and Services Strategy for CDS Caremark, which is the PBM arm of CDS Health.
And I just want to quickly, you have two pieces of information in front of you. One is just a one-pager, and as y'all probably know, CDS, there's three pieces of us, and one of us is our retail stores. So we have pharmacies, and we're just recently expanding into the state. So this sheet's a little outdated, but it's from 2014, but we'll have 6 stores in the state. We employ about 100 people, and we have a little over 12 pharmacists. So we might not be in your community now, but we will by the end of probably next year. And I'm going to let Ian go ahead and talk about the Medicaid piece that you have requested.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about who CVS Health is, because you're probably saying, where's my CVS? Because we've got 7,800 stores across the country, but we don't have a lot of presence here. And then I'm going to talk about a couple of areas that I think we have the best practices to share with you. We serve 13 million Medicaid clients in 27 states. We have 25 health plan clients that we contract for those services. So we don't provide any Medicaid services for Medicaid fee-for-service programs such as Arkansas, but we do contract with clients to provide pharmacy benefits. I'm going to focus on a couple of areas, and one of them, because I think I've done last, is a lot of things that I'm going to touch on have already been touched on. One, I'm going to talk about generic substitution and provide you all with some data around the value of that over chasing rebates. And then the second area, I was going to talk a little bit about the government's initiative to look at managed care for complex populations, touch a little bit on what Mr. Stevens discussed on the high utilizers and some clinical programs that we've been developing. And again, there's going to be some repetition here when we're at the end of the day, so I'll take as many questions as we have on it, but some of it will be repetitive. And I know we had the presentation up there, but if you can turn to slide 3. If you turn to slide 3, this is, I want to just touch briefly on what the CVS Health Enterprise is. We are now the largest healthcare company in the United States, Fortune 10 as of this year. And we have very diverse set of offerings that all come to form a total enterprise of health. And our motto now is helping people on their better path to health. On the CVS Caremark PBM side, I'd like to thank ESI for doing a very thorough description of what we do. As a PBM, we have very similar services and products. We have 2,000 clients. We process over 900 million prescriptions a year on behalf of our clients. And as you can see, we have 63 million members. Of those, 6 million are Medicaid, Medicare, and 13 million Medicaid. We have 7,800 retail pharmacies, and almost 5 million people walk through our doors.
Excuse me, is that going up to 8,800 with your deal with Target?
It will be going up 167. That would be great to go up another 1,000, but we're not.
I thought Target had 1,000 stores, but they must not have pharmacies in every one.
They have 167 pharmacies within the stores, and then they also have some clinics, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Like ESI, or Express Scripts, I was talking about Accredo, we also have a specialty pharmacy arm where we provide those same kind of care management services to certain rare conditions, and feel that it is also complementary to what physicians do. We can talk a little bit more about that as opposed to looking at what physicians do. We also operate about 1,000-minute clinics. These are walk-in clinics that are inside of our pharmacies where you can go receive certain services. They are not meant to replace primary care doctors. In fact, if you look at the provider relationships there, one of the main strategies for minute clinics is actually to work with patient-centered medical homes, accountable care organizations. And so we have just implemented a state-of-the-art medical record system that links directly into physicians and hospitals. So if somebody comes in and they said, I'm going to get my flu shot, we can immediately let their PCP know that they got that flu shot. And it actually helps them with their provider relationships when they're paid on quality. So if primary care physicians are being paid on the number of flu shots that they administer to people over, say, the age of 60, if we're helping them with that, we're helping them, get their value-based payments. And that's a big strategy of what we have right now. If you go to the next slide, it talks about a lot of the same things, but what I really wanted to emphasize is as we've grown and as we've acquired these different lines of businesses, we woke up one day and said, we're just not a pharmacy, we're just
not a claims administrator, we're not a walk-in clinic, we're actually a healthcare company that wants to help manage population health. And one of the core pieces of this is a lot of times the place, and this has kind of come up before today with Dr. Riley, is a lot of times one of the things people get their care is in a pharmacy, or they trust their pharmacies, and it's on the corner, it's their local guy in their little town, and those people are incredibly important to the center, the hub of a lot of these services that we offer. So that's just the background of CVS Health. I want to talk about a couple of things now for Medicaid, and I want to talk about savings from generic dispensing. I think your folks today in the fee-for-service program talked a lot about, I actually took a slide out, I was going to talk about these same things. Some of the challenges that fee-for-service programs have on developing PDLs and formularies, because if a drug manufacturer enters into a rebate agreement with the federal government, then Medicaid has to have that drug on their formulary. And so within those constraints, they do the best they can, and they talk about, how to have the committee to try to find the one really expensive drug and negotiate the supplemental rebates, and that's all good. But one of the things where you can drive generic dispensing is by moving the pharmacy benefit and some of your services into managed care. And that's because health plans do have the ability to limit their formularies to a very strict set of medications. Now, federal law requires that even though we may have a very strict formulary, we have to have an exception process for name brand drugs, which is what we do. And we can talk more about that, but this is a national study, and I know somebody came up, somebody asked, what would it look like for states that, were in fee-for-service versus that could go under PBM and be managed under a PBM. And just to highlight this, if you look at the net cost at the end, that net cost of average per prescription under a fee-for-service, pure fee-for-service state is $43.49, and that's net of rebates. Rebates is that number in the fourth column over, which is $41.01. So if you look at the next, in states with managed care, and I'm going to point something out about the statistic. In states with managed care, in these states, an average of 69% are under managed care. The rest of it's under fee-for-service, because some states only put certain populations in managed care and keep some of them in fee-for-service. You can see even after the reduction in rebates because of the generic dispense increase, and even after administrative and the ACA insurer fees, the net cost per drug is $39.10. It's less. And this is national data that comes from CMS. This was published in April of 2015, and I'm happy to provide this report. This report also, you can see in the kicker at the bottom of the page, is they actually extrapolated, in that 69%, they just peeled out just what the MCOs paid. Their actual net cost was $6.61 left, or 14.1% savings. So, I know I'm talking about managed care, but really what I wanted to illustrate here is when you can get a higher dispensing rate of generics, you can actually get a lot of savings even after you go after those rebates. I wanted to highlight a best practice from the state of North Carolina. North Carolina has a model just like yours. It's fee-for-service. They rely very heavily on patient-centered medical homes to provide primary care. And they came up with, I think, is a very innovative value-based purchasing model for pharmacies. So what they do is, you can only influence the choices of a prescriber so much by a PDL. And so they do that, and then they take it to the next level where they're trying to influence the choices of the pharmacies who are dispensing the drug. So if there's a name brand drug or the generic alternative, the pharmacist can say, I'm doing the name brand that's here, but the prescription says yes, generic substitution is allowable, then they can make that choice. And so on a monthly basis, the state of North Carolina Medicaid actually tracks the generic dispense rate, and I have the report. We get it because, we're a pharmacy, and so our pharmacies get paid this. And, you can see the report line by line with their generic dispense rate. And once they achieve these various levels and tiers, that's what their generic dispense rate is. So while you may be adding a couple of dollars on for generic dispensing, if you're not doing very well at all, you actually get an increase in what that is.
So what did this, it's showing 86% now? What was it before they started doing this? Do you know?
I actually looked at a report, the one actually, because I saw that you also had a 76% dispensing rate, but apparently now it's up to 85 with the new program, but it was 76.
Okay.
And I have that data also. It was part of the report that talked about the value of moving the prescription drug benefit into managed care for the purposes of getting that generic dispense rate. I'm going to highlight a couple of programs on the next slide. So before the Drug Equalization Act, which is part of the Accountable Care Act, state Medicaid programs could only get rebates on drugs that were dispensed through fee-for-service programs. So in the old days, prior to 2010, if a state had a managed care program and a drug benefit was in managed care, they could never get rebates for those. So they were really relying on the contracting ability of those PBMs. After the Drug Equalization Act, they said, no, we're going to allow states to collect rebates for all pharmacy claims, whether they're paid through fee-for-service or they were paid through a managed care entity. After that happened, states started moving the pharmacy benefit from fee-for-service into their managed care organizations. And again, I'm highlighting this because these are some tools that you may consider as you're thinking about models in your healthcare reform. The state of New York expected $100 million of savings annually, but they actually got $425 million in savings. It's a really amazing case study. Again, an independent consulting firm did this study, and I can share that with you. They cited that the main reasons for it were increased generic dispensing rates, and they tracked that, and then lower dispensing fees. And that's what you've heard today, that when you move into a risk entity, the dispensing fees go down. 3 of our own clients saved over $90 million through the formulary design of generics only. State of Texas, they did the same thing. They moved to the pharmacy benefit into managed care in 2012. There was no independent study done in Texas like there was for New York. But what I do have is with the budget estimates from 2011 when they were looking at projections. And this is from the HHSC, which is their Medicaid agency, and their budget estimates range from $65 million in savings to $76 million annually. This includes a combination of cost avoidance and changes in the premium tax that they assessed onto their managed care organizations.
How did Texas and New York do that? Did they do that with one sole provider, or how did they?
Into their plans. So they already had several managed care plans in their state, but they continued to pay the drug benefit fee for service while they paid plans under capitation for everything else. And so what they did is they just amended their contracts and said, now you're going to be paying the prescription drug benefit, and then all of those plans went out to RFP.
So they have no administration from the state level now of pharmacy benefit?
Only for their small fee-for-service populations. Both states have moved almost all of their populations into managed care. And so the difference between the $65 million and then $76 million in the state of Texas is there were 2 scenarios that the state proposed. One was, okay, we're going to move the prescription benefit into managed care, but you still have to follow the state PDL. And I know we talked about that today, and I know that's something that's been out there. So if, the $65 million is related to the state PDL. So the 76 was we're going to let the MCOs and their PBMs control the benefit. They can control the formulary, they can control all the utilization management. They went with a state PDL. We've got several clients in the state of Texas. And so we get state files every week from their vendor drug program, and then we load those. We are able to achieve some of the savings through utilization management controls, but we don't have that flexibility of controlling some of the generic dispensing rates. So I guess one thing we want to highlight is best practice is letting a health plan control their own formulary. And I think I mentioned that as well. So with that, I want to just chat a little bit about the RFI to potentially move complex populations into managed care. I think I've been in managed care and I've been in Medicaid for 20 years. I started at the Arizona Medicaid Agency overseeing their managed care contracting and capitation rate setting, and so I'm really familiar with all of this. And even as I look back over the 20 years, You know, you can have moms and kids in managed care, that's great. But really the populations that can benefit most from enhanced care coordination are really these three areas, and there's maybe potentially a fourth with the foster care children that this RFI identified, and that's the developmentally disabled, the persons with mental illness diagnoses, and persons using long-term care services and supports. Traditionally, all of these populations have been, you know, subject to fragmented care because historically different divisions or different agencies have the oversight authority for them. And so you might get case management over here, you might get service over here. In Arkansas, it sounds like you might not get very much case management at all. And so the goal of these RFIs is to really, you know, break the funding stream, to get rid of all these multiple waivers, get one waiver, and really hold one or three or however many organizations you contract with accountable for that whole system of care. And there's some very interesting models that are coming out right now just in the last couple of years. In fact, the last couple of months, this is the activity. Pennsylvania and Oklahoma also issued RFIs related to moving complex populations into managed care. Oklahoma does not have managed care, and they are not contemplating moving the other populations into it. It's kind of similar to this RFI. Louisiana is issuing an RFP this fall. Nebraska is issuing an RFP this fall. Iowa is awarding contracts at the end of this month. Indiana went live on 4/1. This is all activity around these complex populations. And in North Carolina and Alabama both have legislation. Now it's passed. One of the reasons why it is important is, you know, super utilizers. And Stephen's group report was great, and I haven't seen the new one, and I can't wait to read it because I'm fixated on super utilizers and how we as a pharmacy company and a population health company can help control these costs. 5% of the population accounts for 55% of Medicaid costs. And a super utilizer is even a subpopulation within your highest utilizers, and those typically are defined as people that have multiple ER visits and multiple readmissions. Studies show in state report anywhere from 80 to 100% of super utilizers have a behavioral health diagnosis. Significant percentage, up to 90%, also has substance abuse issues. And so one of the things our clients have come to us with is, what can you do to help us keep them out of the ER? What can you do to help us keep them, you know, out of being readmitted? And this is where the role of the pharmacist and sometimes case managers can actually play a big part. I also noted that a lot of the top 100 and 1,000 today have hemophilia. You know, we obviously use specialty programs at ESI, and I talked about, we have special programs around hemophilia. Blood factors are extremely expensive, and you can't get really around that, but it's how we can help them with share compliance. And I just want to point out that Medicaid is the highest payer of mental health services in this country, and of that, pharmacy is the number one benefit. So our role is really big in how we support our plans in states that have.
Would you say that last part again?
Yes. So, and I can get this data for you from SAMHSA, which is the mental health arm of CMS, but Medicaid pays is the number one payer for mental health services in the U.S. across all payers, Medicare, commercial, government. And if you look at all the services that go in there, you know, provider, hospital, pharmacy is the highest component
of behavioral health?
Yes.
Higher than long-term care?
Yes. For persons with those diagnoses within that set of services. So I'm just going to highlight, and I know it's at the end of the day, we've, you know, other people have already talked about these, but, you know, some of the programs that, you know, we've developed, and Dr. Riley talked about that, you know, he's doing on behalf of Medicare, things like, you know, one-on-one counseling to help improve medication management and adherence. You know, somebody said, I think, is for the seriously mentally ill and the atypical antipsychotics, if they miss 8 or 9 days of those, then, you know, it's like starting over. You know, they're either, you know, in the prison system or they're in the hospital. And so, you know, reaching out to those members and identifying them early is extremely important. And we've developed algorithms, the vulnerable patient index is what we call it, to see through the algorithms of the types of medications they're on, and some clinical data from our clients, whether or not they're going to be at risk for going off those medications. We try to do face-to-face counseling at first fill when they get a new chronic medication, like this is why you need to take it, these are new side effects, call me. It's, you know, our pharmacy network is really a huge partner, and it's not just CVS pharmacies, I want to point out. We have 53,000 other pharmacies that we contract with, and they're just as much of a partner as our own sister pharmacies. If we discover that there is non-adherence, we also then counsel and we contact the physician to let them know that that they also need to have an intervention with the member. I just want to point out a little data. This is our own data from our, it was published in Health Affairs. But you can see the blue that goes down below around 601 and 656. That's with adherence counseling, making sure everybody takes their medications. For about $600 or $650, you're going to get these overall annual savings for members with these chronic conditions. This is keeping them out of the ER. This is keeping them out of the hospital and other expensive interventions. So that's why these types of programs are incredibly important, and these are the kinds of things we bring to our clients. The next slide, again, a little bit more on the pharmacy counseling. And
before you go on that slide, I've got a couple questions here.
Yeah.
Senator Urban, then Representative Boyd. Senator Urban, you're recognized.
Yeah, one of my questions is back on the mental health. I mean, this is a topic that came up just in, you know, utilizing utilizing a primary care physician who is supposed to be the quarterback, you know, with their specialists and their therapy and all of that, community mental health systems. But do you look at, you know, we are really inadequately served in mental health capacity in beds and those types of things, to where, and so I think all of that has to be part of the conversation, and I know that Stephen Group is looking at that, but do you find that in other states where you may be able to bring a great benefit to that whole thing, but if the infrastructure isn't there to support it, then we're just paying money and we're not really fixing the problem. Do you feel, I mean, because absolutely, we find where we have to, I mean, great case in my little California Rock Hospital, they had to put a patient in there for 40 days in the hospital, over a month. It was a mental patient, but they had nowhere to go. And they couldn't bill for that. And they can't afford that cost. I mean, they did because it was a danger to the patient and a danger to others. And what were you going to do with them? So, I mean, we have a real frail infrastructure issue here in Arkansas. But do you find that in other states? And
You do, and I'm sure Mr. Stevens is going to be looking at different types of waivers, and you know there are these health home models now that are specific, particularly for the SMI population. But there are waivers where you can get community and housing supports for persons, you know, particularly for seriously mentally ill folks. And a big piece of this is transitioning them out of the prison system into the community. And you're not alone there, and I think every state has struggled and dealt with those issues. I know we did in Arizona. The other thing that you go to conferences and you hear people talking about now are the social determinants of health. And one of the big social determinants of health is, do you have a place to sleep? And so a lot of the things that our Medicaid clients and managed care are doing now is they're creating these community health teams. And they're deployed out into the places where there are a lot of vulnerable populations. And they don't even talk to them about not getting health care right away. Their first questions are, do you have a place to sleep? Do you have a place to eat? Do you have friends? Do you have family? Is there anybody I can talk to? And with this vulnerable population, that's one of the biggest, because a lot of them are transient, you know, and if you're in a small town and you don't have the type of supportive housing, you know, that can absorb that population, it's a challenge. And there is some waiver money out there, but I've been out of the waiver game for a while, so I can't tell you exactly what it is. Thank you.
Representative Boyd, you're recognized.
How about that? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't take a lot of time. Maybe we can visit after this for a few minutes. But I'm just very intrigued by this slide that is currently up here. it might tell me in the fine print a little bit more, but how is this calculated? I mean, are these really hard costs, or are these just kind of soft, maybe? I mean, do you really have good solid data that shows that these type of savings with
Yes.
adherence?
Yes, we do. And again, this is published in Health Affairs, and it says client-specific modeling available upon request. So
Okay.
we will be happy to get that information for you. If you look at, M. Brennan there, Troy M. Brennan, he is our Chief Medical Officer.
Okay.
And I can get with him afterwards, and we can help provide you the details around this data. But it's powerful stuff.
This is very powerful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And the next one is just sort of, again, re-emphasizing why patient adherence is so important, and where that role of the pharmacist really, is critical. So, you can see just with oral anti-diabetics, the compliance rate is 38, but after you give that pharmacist intervention, it goes up. And so I'm not going to dwell a lot on this slide, but the role of the pharmacist is very important. And again, as I say, we develop the programs, but we have important partners on those programs. And it's an additional revenue stream for the pharmacies.
Okay, we've got another question. Senator Bledsoe, you recognize.
Thank you. I think during today we have heard about all those groups that would like to help the patients comply. And of course we know that that is very important, especially with diabetics. That's a lot of
hands-on stuff?
right.
Yeah. No, I understand exactly what you're saying about it. Like, how many case managers can a person have, and are they even talking to each other? Yeah. So, no. And in fact, the clients say, hey, if you're touching that number, we need to know because we're touching that number.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so those are, there's reporting, and our goal is not to get in the way of physicians. It's really to complement what they do, because we don't want to be in the way. But we're at the point of sale, and so that's where the pharmacist sometimes can be a hub, and it's where does the pharmacist plug in versus some of these others. It was funny, we really wanted to help with readmissions by getting pharmacists engaged, and we got some feedback. We did hire a bunch of people to do a study, and it was like, you're getting in the way of all these other readmission programs. And we're like, okay, that doesn't seem to be like the best use of our resources.
Well, just during the meeting, I have just made a very short list of those who are doing the same thing. And your patient-centered medical homes, that's part of what they want to do. You have your area agencies on aging. That's what they are supposed to be doing. You have now, as of last session, the community paramedic program that we have just put into place. And so we have all these people that are trying to do the same thing, and not only am I worried about or concerned about overlapping services, but the cost of the services. Like you said, that is a...
Or it's contradictory.
Right. But you mentioned that that would be another revenue stream for the pharmacist, and we will probably be seeing something in the next legislative session about medication therapy and paying for that. But it's just hard to justify all these people doing the same thing and paying for all of them to do it. And so what would you say to that?
Well, there is a lot of overlap, and I've heard that from other places as well. But when I think about what the area agencies on aging do, they're going to really try to connect that senior to Meals on Wheels, right? They're going to really try to connect that senior to, maybe a senior center where they can get social interaction. Those are a lot of activities of the area agency. That's not what we're doing. We're really
Well, I
trying to...
understand, excuse me for interrupting, I understand that. I was on the board of the area agency on aging in my area, but they do have home health attendants that go in, and that's part of what they do. They say, have you had your medicine? And they try to manage that. But I just see all of this as truly a new revenue stream for someone, and so I'm very concerned. You mentioned the point of sales, and that's where the people come to get their medicine, but there are other things like going into the physician's office, and if he's not part of the patient-centered medical home, some pharmacists, I'm sorry, some physicians do have nurses that help with that, and specifically calling patients that are in their group to see that they're taking their medicine. So I just,
So I can tell you, not all of our clients ask us to do this for them. So,
okay, well, how do you get paid for that? How does a pharmacist or a pharmacy get paid for that? Is that just,
they refer the interventions and they would inform us of that and then we would pay them. And then those interventions would be communicated to the health plan.
okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just wanted to ask if when a state moves to like a managed care type of situation, obviously you're targeting this, was it 14% or 15% or whatever the number is, but do you have any feel for how many state employees are then able to be reduced also as part of that kind of a transition?
I don't, without knowing exactly what the infrastructure of the pharmacy program is. So I can't see because I don't have an exact plan for it. But a lot of that infrastructure would be used.
Representative Hammer, you're right now.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure I got a grasp on this. So you, basically, y'all are coming in and targeting a specific niche related to the pharmaceutical aspect of a patient's care, and y'all are saying that you can do it better and less expensive end result to the state. Is that kind of the nuts and bolts?
That's just, yeah, and that's what it's on slide 11 where it shows, we're, talking to somebody about making sure they're on their medications, proactively reaching out when they're not, giving some education, communicating doctors annual savings. And again, we're going to provide data on that.
And I just want to add, this isn't specific just to Arkansas. We're not in an RFP type of situation where we've been given specific information. This is really what we see in other states and what we've done in other states.
So this
that
is anything
it
new?
would depend on what y'all choose to do. Then you do the RFP process and you do all the different companies and they present, and that's a whole nother policy.
And so have you taken a look at all the laws and the makings of, Arkansas and said, okay, if we were to come into Arkansas, we could do this by replacing A, D, and F as far as, maybe people that are currently providing those services, and the end result to the state budget is it could be done for less money without compromising quality to the patient. Have you taken a look at all the Arkansas laws and all that we do and kind of put together a scenario?
We have not yet.
Okay. Now, as far as how does the dispensing fee have, the cost of the dispensing fee that is charged, does it have anything to do with what your services that you're offering or that you're talking about providing? Is it tied into the dispensing fee at all?
As far as the savings on the advice that the pharmacy has to cancel?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Okay, that's it. Thanks for sure.
Okay, that's all. You guys go ahead.
So the next program is where, again, our clients will say, and I have an example, a real life example from Medicaid where they wanted to target some members that didn't get their flu vaccine. And so what we're able to do is get that data, put it into our adjudication system. So when somebody comes in to fill a prescription drug, we are able to message them saying, pharmacists can say, hey, you need your flu shot. And additionally, we put it on the bag tag. We call it health tag. That's just our name. And if you go to the next slide, you can actually see this is a client targeted message. Our client, a member targeted message that our client asks us to send. And so this is another type of program where because we happen to touch the members quite frequently, we can get important messages to the Medicaid members to close gaps in care. And again, these are the kinds of things that can reduce costs.
Did the flu vaccination thing that you did end up being a net savings for the plan?
Well, presumably it is because if they got the flu vaccination, then people don't get flu, right?
But there was no follow-up to estimate how many less you had from the previous year.
I don't know, I'd have to follow up. Let me look into that.
you know, again, Dr. Riley spoke about comprehensive medical reviews, you know, as part of NCM, medication therapy management. But this is a real picture of a super utilizer. It came out of a study that Governing Magazine highlighted, and it was a primary care home, CMHC in somewhere in New Jersey. And this is an actual photo of all the prescription drugs. They went in, they looked, and you know, who knows what all this was. And you know, people are coming in and out of the hospital and the ER. They may be getting prescribed things. And so, to your point, Senator, you know, ECMH should be looking at this. But sometimes it's helpful to have, you know, a pharmacist who is trained and really understanding as part of that team. You know, I don't think we want to replace that team, but we want to be part of that continued health team where we supplement, you know, the knowledge of those governors. So anyway, I just love that photo because I think this happens a lot more than we think. And then just the last slide is we do have a comprehensive medication review. Again, we target certain people that have, you know, on a lot of maintenance medications that might be getting multiple prescriptions that could start conflicting with each other.
Okay. Representative Hammer's got a question, just real quick.
Thanks. And I'm trying to tie it together, maybe you can help me, between the people that go into like our county health units now and they do those massive those massive flu shots and all that stuff. Would y'all have any involvement in anything along that line, or would you have access to that population where it might be a cost savings if you could do it less expensive than what we're doing through the county health units, or are you familiar enough with that comment?
We'd have to look at that. I think, you know, we do a lot of in-store events.
Yeah, I would say it just depends on the state and what presence we have there. I know in certain states that we have both CVS stores and the clinics. Generally, we do in-store events. Sometimes I know just off the back of my head, one of our state plans actually, that's one of the things they do. They offer a free flu shot to all the state employees. So I don't know price-wise if it's different from going to the community health departments, but some of you probably look at.
Yeah, we have a large client here in the private option. It makes it something else that would be there.
And can y'all help those other 200 independent pharmacists that are losing their contract services? Is that something your company can do to go out, or is that totally unrelated to that? The ones that were that we had the discussion before.
So it is unrelated because like Express Scripts, we have clients. And so if one of Express Scripts clients, you know, says this is the kind of contract we're going to pursue, and pharmacies say we don't want to be in your network anymore, they can be in our network, they may already be in our network, but not for that particular client. So we have different clients.
Senator Irvin, you recognize.
Quick question on your picture. Do you participate and work with the drug take back program?
Yes, we do.
And do you have? I mean, what is your level of what's your level of input into those?
So we partner with local police departments. That's how we found it's been safest for our employees and our pharmacists to not put the drug take back in the store. So we've done a series of grants with local police departments, fire departments as well, and I can get you a list of those that we've done across the country. They've been very successful.
Do you provide somebody there with the expertise and ever bringing in those medicines? Is able to provide?
I'm not sure if it's someone on site or how long that they do it for, you know, if it's for a 2-week period and always there. If someone at the police department is tasked with knowing exactly what to do, I can certainly find that out for you.
Okay, just be interested in your level of involvement in that.
Okay. Go ahead. Y'all are press on. Or are you done?
I think we're done.
I think you got this, you know, the next slide there says questions, but we kind of just violated that all the way through here. Well, thank you all for coming. That was very informative, and it sometimes makes more questions than we started with, but some great sources of data, and I appreciate y'all coming up, and you'll probably be hearing from us again. That's all.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Okay, members, thank you for a full day. Tomorrow's schedule's gonna be busy. This one was just a warm-up. But tomorrow we've got, the health payment improvement initiative, we've got eligibility enrollment framework, we've got, status of people who've moved out of the state and unable to locate, and then we've got, to figure out if they got the McKinsey contract fixed. So it's gonna be a busy day tomorrow, but we get an early start at 9 o'clock. Oh, wait. And then we're going to review the cost of the private option from the providers. So we'll hear from some of the insurance providers, as well as closing comments from the Stephen Group, where I would again encourage you to review the reports. And if you have questions for the Stephen Group, we'll do that tomorrow afternoon or evening whenever we finish up. Mr. Chair?
We're going to break tomorrow for lunch at 11:30.
Walgreens scared that man. Walgreens ain't afraid of Lone Ranger. Now where
Probably more fun.